The French defense. First of all, this is one of my favorite openings, and you're about to learn everything there is to learn about the French defense. The opening move, the middle game tactics, the end game, everything. In addition to that, I created a video explaining the full theory of the French defense, and that will be available on the membership section on YouTube. So if you're trying to master the French, watch this full video, apply what I teach, and watch your ratings go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region. Today, I'm going to be showing you guys the French defense. It's one of those openings where you give wide control over the center of the board. You absorb the attack that they're going to do, and then you counter attack them with your very aggressive, active pieces. So, for example, notice how we have this bad bishop. Eventually, we're going to be able to use our bad bishop to our advantage. Now he plays knight to f3, though he's playing the advanced variation of the French, but playing knight to f3 this early is already not good. He needed to play c3. Whenever they play knight f3 without playing c3, just take on d4 because now their pawn on e5 becomes very weak. All right, knight takes d4 was played. Let's just play knight c6. I'm not only developing my knight and applying some pressure to his knight, I'm also attacking this unprotected pawn. So he decides to play the move bishop to b5 and apply some pressure to my pin knight. But all I'm going to do here is play bishop to b7. And this bishop is going to be serving as a key defensive piece in my position. So even though he takes with his knight and okay, in this position, taking with the pawn gives me a tempo, by the way. But what I'm seeing is if I take with the pawn and he pulls his bishop back to d3, I'm still going to be left with my bad bishop and he's going to have his good bishop. So I'm going to choose to take with the bishop so that way I'm able to get rid of my bad bishop. And now it's going to be way easier for me to simply win the game by putting my pawns on light squares. So he's developing normally. We also need to develop our pieces. Can't put the knight on f6. Don't want to put the knight on the edge of the board. So let's just play the move knight to e7. And the idea of playing knight e7 is I want to play this move knight g6, which will be targeting his unprotected pawn. But because he develops his bishop and applies some pressure to my knight, it means my knight is pinned and can't move. So let's move the queen out the way, getting out of the pin. But now I'm also attacking his unprotected pawn on e5. So he plays f4, not a bad move. I'm going to try to set up a little trap here. Like this move, knight to g6. What does knight to g6 do? I want you guys to notice how his bishop all of a sudden has nowhere to go. So now he has to be extremely careful, which he wasn't, which means we already have a tactic. Once I hit him, well, not really, because once I hit him with this move, pawn to h6, it doesn't necessarily win the bishop, but he has to put his bishop on h4, and the bishop is practically just not doing anything. So I don't think I'm in any rush to take that bishop, to be honest. Maybe he wants to get his king castled on the king side. Castling on the king side, that's when I'm going to expose his king. So let's just use the time to finish our development. Bishop to c5. He's also not able to castle his king. So I'm expecting him to move his queen with the idea of castling on the queen side. But then I'm going to be able to start my own attack on his queen side. Well, instead he plays a3. I'm assuming he wants to play b4. Doesn't do much. I could get my king out the center, but I'm thinking queen b6 so that way if he plays b4, I'm able to check his king and prevent castle. Or maybe even play bishop to d4 and attack the knight. How necessary are these moves though? That's the thing. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Let's just play a5. This is called prophylaxis. It's seeing the opponent's idea and we're basically preventing it. Now he's not able to play b4. Okay, he puts his knight on a5 instead, which is attacking my bishop. But let's just pull the bishop back to a7. He's still not able to get castled. His knight is now on the edge of the board, and his bishop on h4 is just out of place. All right, moving the queen definitely signifies he's trying to castle on the queen side. So let's get our king out the center of the board. And then I'm going to start an attack on his king, which will be on the queen side. But instead, he played f5. And that's the first blunder of the game. Now, this is called the drawback principle, guys, where before you move a piece, you have to ask yourself, what was the pawn doing? For example, notice how the pawn was guarding this pawn on e5. Moving to f5 no longer guards the pawn, which means I'm now able to just take the pawn on e5. I'm also attacking his queen, and the queen now just has to move out the way. He also needs to be careful where he puts the queen, because if he puts his queen on any weird squares, knight to f3 could be forking something. Okay, he pulls the queen back to f1, which means there's no forks here. He's also guarding his pawn on f5. We're still going to take on f5 though, because I'm trying my best to open the position, because whenever the opponent's king is in the center of the board, our goal is to open the center. Ah, you know what's funny, guys? I was just about to say I'm threatening to trap his bishop, but he saw that and he played this move, g3, which means I'm not going to be able to trap his bishop because if I play g5, he's just going to move the bishop out the way. I could take with the pawn, but I'm assuming he's just gonna still move the bishop, but it's fine. In a lot of cases, my plan is to play knight to f3 and check the king. But instead, he got his king out the center of the board. The thing is, though, I'm now just ahead by a whole 3 pawns. So this is just a huge advantage for black. Let's jump in on f3 still, hitting the unprotected bishop. I am expecting him to play this move, bishop to g3. But because I'm ahead in material, I'm now going to try to trade some pieces off the board. What am I going to do to trade some pieces off the board? Hit him with the move bishop to e3 check. It's also a forcing move. And remember, guys, whenever you're playing, you always want to try to start by looking on the checks first. So he moves the king out the way. Now I play bishop to f4 because now I'm trying to trade some pieces off the board, but I'm also trying to play some knight d2 check ideas to fork his king and his queen. Couldn't do it before though because my queen was under attack. But let's see how he's going to continue. Okay, he moves the queen, which means we're still not able to go here. If he takes, I'm just going to take back. I need to ensure that all my pieces are playing. So right now, my rooks aren't doing anything. So I'm going to start by playing the move rook to b8. Notice what I'm doing here. Putting my rook on the same line as his king. And then eventually, I want to play rook e8 to put my rook on this open file. All right, he finally decides to trade. Let's just take back. I'm also attacking his unprotected knight that is on the edge of the board. Remember not to put your knights on the edge of the board, guys. Like, they just don't control enough squares. He saw that. He did not lose his knight. He moves his knight out of danger. But now I want to attack this knight. I want you guys to notice how my rook is on the same line as his king, which means if I now play the move queen to c4, I am in fact attacking the knight because pin pieces don't protect. He moves his queen to e2, trying to trade. Bro, why are you even trying to trade when you're down in material? That's not how you should be doing it. But now we take the free knight, knowing that pin pieces don't protect. And we're also threatening all types of checkmates on b2. So he's still begging me for a queen trade, but that's just a checkmate. More French defense against 600 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 600. Let's play some more French defense. Knight f3. Now we play d5. Maybe we're not going to be getting an exchange variation of the French defense. And players at the lower level, they're always going to try to play the exchange variation of the French, but we're seeing another advanced variation. Let's play this move pawn c5. Very important move, by the way, because we're controlling this very important d4 square. Now he decides to check us with his bishop. Let's just develop the knight. Very normal move. And bishop to d7 in that position would have also been a good move, by the way, guys, because where if you're able to exchange your bad light squared bishop, then go for it. Now he plays pawn to d4. Not a bad move. Let's go bishop to d7. There's a tactic that I want to teach you guys about whenever this bishop is on b5. And if the bishop is on b5 and the bishop is unprotected, this is a tactic alert, guys. Please ensure that you know about this pattern. And it's not just the French defense. Because the bishop is unprotected, I'm able to hit him with this move, knight takes e5. What does this do? If he takes my knight in any way, I take his unprotected bishop. If he takes on d7 in any way, then I take on d7 with the knight, and just like that, I'm already ahead in material. Now, there's not just the advanced variation of the French, there's the Tarrasch, there's the classical, there's the Winnower variation. But do not worry, let's just develop the knight. I will be explaining the full French defense theory for all my members of the channel. So if you're not yet a member, consider subscribing to the membership section of the channel to become a member. So he plays this move bishop to g5. He's pinning the knight to the queen. Doesn't do much though. So let's just play the move bishop d6, developing the bishop, pointing the bishop towards his king. And now I'm trying to play moves like h6, eventually. Like I'm surely going to just get my king out the center of the board first. He moves his queen in order to connect his rooks. Let's get my king out the center. Okay, now he plays knight b5. Now, whenever you're faced with these types of move, guys, do not give up the bishop for the knight. Feel free to pull your bishop all the way back to b8. Maintain this diagonal because we're always able to chase away the knight. And then once we chase away the knight, we will be able to put the bishop back on d6. And then he plays knight e5, which means the guy has some issues counting. Like, you guys should stop making counting type of mistakes. For example, notice how there's two pieces attacking the e5 square. He only has one pawn guarding the e5 square. So once I take on e5 and he takes back, my bishop is going to take, and now I'm going to be ahead by 2 pawns. So he took, Let's just stay back. We're now ahead by 2 pawns. My bishop is unprotected though, so I am expecting him to try to attack my bishop. Let's see what move he's gonna play. Okay, he didn't do that. He played something defensive instead because my bishop was attacking b2. Now, here's what I'm going to hit him with. You guys need to understand how the principle of neutralization works. And what that is whenever there's a piece on your half of the board, it's very important that you chase those pieces away. So pawn to a6 is immediately hitting the knight, and I am also forcing him to put his knight on the edge of the board. And nobody wants their knight on the edge of the board. So he did move his knight all the way to the edge of the board. Now we play h6. What's the idea with h6? Now I'm trying to chase his bishop off of my half of the board. So remember, guys, do not allow pieces on your half of the board. But if they are on your half of the board, it has to be a plan to chase them away. Now, this is an interesting move because he's sacrificing his bishop to expose my king. But a queen by itself is not gonna checkmate my king, bro. Like, if someone is sacrificing and it's only a queen that they have in the attack, there's not gonna be anything here. And a very good way to defend against these types of sacrifices is to pull the knight back to h7. The knight controls some very important squares, so that way the queen is not able to check. And pulling the knight back to f7 allows you to swing your queen in the game to attack their queen because you're now ahead in material, so you are trying to trade some pieces off the board. All right, now he's using his rook to attack my bishop. Remember, if you have to move your piece away, move it somewhere where you're attacking something. So now I pull my bishop back to g7, but I am attacking his queen. All right, the queen goes back to f4, but we're not stopping here. Let's go e5, continue to chase the opponent's pieces back. My rooks are the only pieces that is not doing anything, but I'm not stopping here. He puts his queen on the same line as my king. All right, because the queen is on the same line as the king, let's just move the king out of the way. Like, you guys should not be comfortable when someone's piece is on the same line as your king or as your queen. Now he plays c4. There's obviously a reason why he plays c4. He wants me to take so that way his knight is able to get off the edge of the board. But remember, guys, to take is a mistake. Only trade pieces if it improves your position or hinders the opponent's position. So instead of trading, I'm just going to play pawn to d4. Now I have a pass pawn, and my plan from here is to eventually start rolling my f-pawn up the board to attack his queen, or put my rook on the same line as his queen to set up some tactic. But this guy is super aggressive. Now he sacrifices his rook, but I'm just going to take the rook. Again, we are not afraid of sacrifice if the queen is the only piece that is in the attack. Now that I'm ahead by an entire rook, definitely going to start trading some pieces off the board. And you know what the funny thing about this is? If he does not try to trade the queens off the board, then his king is going to be the one who is under attack. Okay, it's crazy how you sacrifice pieces, but then you have to just trade everything off the board. Now I have a pass pawn. I'm ahead by a rook. I'm just going to put my rooks on the file, roll the pass pawn up the board, and win a very simple game. All right, he's putting his rook on the file. Let's put my rook on the file as well. Just trying to trade some pieces here. Bro, what is this? That's a rook. What is this? Lock in. Okay, he moves his king out the way. Let's just roll the pass pawn up the board. I'm just going to get a new queen and checkmate his king. But the opponent resigns. More French defense against 700 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 700. We're playing some more French defense. Before we play d5, will we see an exchange variation, an advanced variation? An advanced. It's funny how I think most lower rated players play the exchange, but I'm seeing a lot of people playing the advanced variation of the French. But being a French defense player, the advanced variation should be your favorite line to see. And then f4 is that's definitely not the move. He needed to play c3 because now once I take on d4, for one, I have 2 pawns in the center versus his 1 pawn in the center. And once his queen takes, I'm able to develop my knight and gain tempo on his queen. Now he's forced to move the same piece more than once in the opening. So he pulls the queen all the way back. And one thing I like to do is get my knight to the f5 square. Knight e7, knight f3. Let's go knight e7. If knight f3, I go knight f5. And eventually my plan is to play bishop c5. Like once I play bishop c5, it will also prevent his king from castling. All right. Knight goes to f3. Now we play knight f5. He's going to want to castle his king. All right. bd3 applies pressure to the knight. But now we're going to just develop the bishop to c5. And that king is not leaving the center anytime soon. All right. Now he moves the queen. Doesn't really do much. Let me just get my king out the center because his king is not leaving the center. Learn to count, bro. It's what the guy just did. He thought the queen was guarding the bishop, which it is, but I have two pieces covering the square, bro. So I'm just gonna take a free bishop. That's how bad he wanted to castle? Because now he's able to castle. But if he castle, he's also losing his rook. Okay, this is probably stilting. Or maybe he's trying to hit me with a Greek gift sacrifice. So we have to be careful. Maybe I just got tricked. So let's calculate. If I take on h7 and then he check, and then I go back to h8, there's queen to h5. How do I prevent a checkmate? Come on, bro. Why would you check on d3? Like if you had played knight g5, I would have played king g6. No, I'm just gonna move my king out the way. And even if he plays knight g5, no, then I'm just gonna play g6. I mean, it's still a bit tricky though, because after g6, nah, it's not. This is just winning. Okay, now we play g6. I thought he was able to play queen to h3 to threaten mate here, but there's no mate. So I'm just ahead by 5 points. And we're about to get even more material. Now, notice how there's a little forking idea here, but I can't fork because the queen guards it. So what am I going to do? I'm going to play the move knight b4. It applies more pressure to the pawn, but it's also attacking his queen. So now he's forced to move his queen out the way. Then I'll take on c2, and maybe I could even checkmate his king in the center. All right, he moves the queen to b3. Now we take on c2 with check. That's a fork. The game is over, by the way. We don't even want this guy's rook because notice where he puts the king? On e2. Remember, whenever you see a good move, look for a better one. Instead of going here to take the rook, I play knight d4, and that's a fork. And he resigns. More French defense against 800 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 800. More French defense coming your way. D4. Now we play d5. What version of the French will we be seeing? Knight c3. This is very classical stuff. I like to play bishop to b4, and I'm going to be playing the winner variation of the French in this French defense video. Maybe in another French defense video that I make, I play the regular classical variation, and then maybe in another one far down the line, I take on e4. Queen to d3. The whole idea, though, was to pin the knight so that way I'm attacking the pawn. But because he's developing his queen so early, I'm just going to take on e4. Why? Because you should not be moving the queen so early in the opening. And you guys are going to see exactly why people should not be developing their queen this early. Because once he takes, that's already moving the queen twice. And I'm going to be forcing him to move his queen again. Queen took. Now we play knight f6, forcing him to move his queen again. And then after he moves his queen, then I'll simply continue with my development. Okay, he pulled his queen back. Before I do much, let's just get my king out the center of the board. Like that's super important because now that my king is out the center, I can start creating some plans where I try to open the center with his king in the center, but he plays bishop to d2, so it's very likely that he's going to be castling on the queen side. I'm going to play this move pawn to c5, very thematic playing the French. The idea is once he takes, we're not going to take the queen because if we take the queen, it's just helping his bishop. If he takes, I'm going to go queen a5, especially if he castles on the queen side, it becomes easier for me to attack him on a2. Okay, he develops his knight. And now I'm just going to take. Like if he plays knight takes, there's always e5, which hits the knight. And if he plays queen takes, it's the same idea. Don't take the queen because it helps him to develop the knight. So move the queen to a5, and then eventually I'm going to be able to play knight c6 and gain some tempo on his queen. So he took with the queen. We're not trading. Let's just play queen a5. The plan is to gain more tempo on the queen. This is exactly why you don't develop your queen early, guys. Okay, that's an interesting move because it is attacking my bishop. But remember, guys, offense is the best defense. Instead of just moving my bishop away, I'm just going to attack his queen because if he takes my bishop, I'm able to take his rook. So he still has to move his queen out the way. And then even after moving his queen out the way, I don't have to move my bishop because his rook is unprotected. So he moves the queen out of the way. We do not move the bishop because if he takes, he loses the rook. So now we play the move pawn e5. The purpose of e5 is it allows me to develop my bishop. And in a lot of cases, I want to hit him with this move pawn to e4 because his queen and his knight is adjacent to each other. And once you see persons pieces adjacent to each other like that, that's when we start thinking about pawn forks. All right, now he plays knight e4. Very interesting move. He's threatening to take my knight and double up my pawns. In some cases, he's threatening to take on b4, but then I'll still be able to play knight takes b4. If I take on d2, however, he's more than likely going to be taking with this knight, which is fine. Like, I think my position is still fine. Like, if I take his knight, he takes with the queen, then I hit him with this move, f5. But what I don't want him to take, though. That's the thing. I actually don't want him to take. So let's take on d2 first. He's not able to take with the queen because he loses the knight. So I'm expecting him to take with this knight. He took with the queen. Come on, bro. This is the drawback principle. Moving the queen from d3 to d2 left the knight unprotected. And now my queen is not unprotected. So now I take the free knight. And if he takes my queen, I take back his queen. And just like that, we are ahead in material. So he's trading queens. Let's just take back. Now we're ahead by a full piece. By the way, still going to continue to develop our pieces here. And he took on e5, which is also another blunder. Because all I'm going to do is I'm going to hit him with this move, rook to e8. Notice what I'm doing. I'm attacking the unprotected knight, but I'm also putting my rook on the same line as his king. So the moment he moves that knight out the way, I'm going to be hitting him with all sorts of discovered attacks, which is why he didn't move the knight. Instead, he plays f4. But I'm still going to hit him with f6 because all I'm trying to do is to get him to move the knight out the way. Huh. But now he plays bishop c4 to check my king. Maybe he missed that my knight was covering the square, but let's just take, because it's the same thing if he takes with the knight. My rook is still on the same line as the king. Tactic alert. Now, what I'm about to do is called a discovered attack, one of the main tactics that I discuss in my upcoming book. Now, there's a few ways how I could do this. I could play knight to g3, check the king, and then once the king move, I take the rook and he takes back my knight. But why take a rook to only lose my knight and gain 2 points when I'm able to play something like knight d6, checking the king, the knight attacks the knight, so I'm now going to be getting a full 3 points. And the opponent resigns. More French defense against 900 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 900. More French defense coming your way. Before we play d5, let's see what we're going to see. We're seeing the advanced variation of the French. Whenever they play advanced, I like to just play c5, and usually the correct move is pawn c3. They play knight f3, I just take on d4, because now the pawn on e5 becomes very weak. Knight takes d4, we play knight c6, and already we're targeting their weak pawn on e5. So he's trading, which is also moving the same pieces more than once in the opening. Bishop to d3, that's a good score for a bishop though, because he's basically putting his bishop on the square where once I castle my king, he should be able to get some attack. Now, one plan I have is to exchange my bad bishop for his good bishop. How am I going to do this? Just going to play bishop to a6. And you're probably looking on the position and you're like, bro, you just blundered your bishop. What are you doing? Not really, because now his bishop is unprotected. Now his king is exposed, which means now I'm able to play queen to a5, check the king, hit the unprotected bishop, and I successfully eliminate my bad bishop for his good bishop. He blocks with the bishop. Now I'm able to take on a6. I'm also preventing his king from castling, so I'm expecting him to play something like queen to e2, which is a very good move, by the way. Instead, he puts his knight on the edge of the board, which is not good because I have two pieces covering the square. He only has his pawn covering the square. So once I take on a6, I'm already winning a pawn. He takes, now we take back, and just like that, we're ahead by a pawn. At least he gets to get his king out the center of the board. But let's finish my development. And now the plan is to get my king out the center of the board. Okay, it's crazy how this guy's down in material and he's still trying to offer queen trades. That's crazy. The principled thing to do in this position would be to trade the queens, but because I'm so higher rated than him, I know that I'm going to be able to use my queen and just win some material. But if you guys watching this, if you are watching and you're ahead by a pawn and someone offer a queen trade, just trade the queens off the board, bring all the pieces in the game and play the end game. All right, now he's getting his rook in the game. Let's get my king out the center of the board. A3. Okay, that move didn't really do much, but I have an idea about what he's trying to do. He's trying to go bishop to b5 and then put the bishop on this diagonal. But let's just go knight g6 and apply some pressure to this pawn. And then once he puts the bishop here, now I play rook to c8. Because now my plan is to play c5. And eventually I want to play rook to b8 to get all my pieces as active as possible. Another idea that I'm seeing is, let's say he moves his bishop. I'm able to swing my queen over and then try to start play moves like knight f4 or knight h4, threatening some checkmate on g2. Okay, instead he moves his queen, but there is a drawback. By moving the queen from c1 to g5, he's leaving his pawn on c2 unprotected. I will be taking that free pawn. But before I take the free pawn, I'm going to hit him with this move, pawn to c5, because the threat is better than the execution. He still has to move his bishop out of the way, then I'll take the free pawn. I don't want to take the pawn and then after he moves the rook, I'm now not able to play c5, because the moment I take, I will have two connected pass pawns rolling up the board. Okay, he pulls the bishop back, which is even better for me because now I take and I hit the bishop, assuming he's able to use one of his rooks and attack my queen though. But now I have a very simple plan to win this game. Just roll the pawns up the board. Okay, he hits the queen. Remember, if you have to move a piece away, move it somewhere where you attack something else. So that way you can at least keep the tempo and keep the initiative. Because now if he doesn't protect the pawn, I could just take the pawn, even though just rolling these pawns up the board is also good enough to win. Okay, very interesting move. He's putting his rook on the same line as my queen. But what if I hit him with d4? Because there are two pieces adjacent to each other, which means we are able to think about pawn forks. That's how I explain it in my upcoming book. Now, pawn to d4, let's say he takes, my queen is going to be under attack. But then if I take, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Because after he takes my queen, his queen guards his rook. So before I do any of this, let's just play h6 first. I'm trying to get his queen to leave his rook unprotected through the x-ray. And if I'm able to do this, then this move pawn to d4 will work. So now that he pulls the queen back, now I'm able to play pawn to d4. And that's rightfully a fork. Maybe he thinks he's able to take on d4 and okay, I'm attacking your queen. But that does not work. Because now once I take on d4, he's not able to take my queen, which is he quickly took the queen. But that's just a checkmate. More French defense against 1,000 level players. Stick around. Your opponent is now 1,000. More French defense coming your way. So before we now play d5, let's see what version of the French we're going to get. At the lower level, most persons usually play the exchange variation of the French. And now we're seeing knight c3. Now, this is now like choices. Like as a French player, you could choose to take on e4, you could choose to play knight f6, and you could choose to play bishop to b4. Now, personally, I play the winner variation of the French defense with bishop to b4. The whole idea of the winner is it pins the knight, which means we're automatically threatening to win this pawn. So he plays knight e2, just to support the knight. But the whole idea was just to capture this pawn on e4. So the guy already just blundered his pawn on e4. Now, at the higher level, I've seen persons play this against me, especially with pawn a3. So he either blunders the pawn or know exactly what he's doing. Now, here's how I like to continue from here. Even though bishops are better than knights, I don't want to waste time pulling my bishop back. So I'm going to liquidate the position by taking on c3 with check. And then once he takes back, he's now attacking my pawn on e4. I don't necessarily want to give him back the pawn on e4, but I don't want to play a move like f5 because that's definitely being greedy. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to develop the knight to c6, which means I'm giving back the e pawn, but at the cost of him losing the d pawn, which means it's not good for him to take on e4, which is why he played bishop e3 in order to protect the pawn. Now that he protects the pawn, that's when I play knight f6, defending my pawn on e4. So yes, we are already ahead by a pawn, 7 moves into the French. Usually they play bishop to b5 here, and they try to take the knight and double up the pawns, but I'm just following principles at the end of the day. I'm just going to get my king out the center of the board. Okay, now he plays g3. Okay, now I definitely see why he would play g3. He's trying to go bishop to g2 to win back his pawn on e4. That move makes a lot of sense. And I'm not really seeing exactly how I can prevent this, basically. So I think I'm just going to continue to follow principles. Let's see. Pawn to b6, knight, pawn to b6, bishop to g2, bishop to a6. And if he plays knight takes, bishop takes, this is under attack. So don't want to go. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. I was trying to find some clever ways to keep his king in the center of the board, but I'm not really seeing it. So he plays the move bishop to g2, definitely targeting my pawn on e4. Let's just go queen e7 with the idea of playing e5, so that way I'm able to finally develop my light squared bishop and get my rooks in the game. All right, so knight e4 was played. That was a good move. The whole idea was to play pawn to e5, so that way I'm able to open this diagonal for my bishop. His king is also in the center of the board, which is why I chose queen to e7. So, you could say I'm also putting my queen on the same line as his king. So I think it's best for him to like, take on f6, then play d5, or just play immediate d5. Like if he takes on e5, it's just going to be helping my position. The whole idea of me playing e5 is just to develop my bishop though. Okay, queen moving the queen is weird. It's also very suspicious because your king is in the center of the board, bro. Like if your king is in the center of the board, you shouldn't allow moves like pawn takes d4 because now your knight could also be pinned. For example, if he takes with the bishop, his knight is now just pinned. Okay, now he has to be careful. I think black is now just better. Like there's no way black is not just better here. All right, so there's still a lot of pressure on my knight. So if takes, pawn takes, then I'm doubling up my pawns. There's the idea of bishop f5, but there's still takes, doubling up my pawns. I want to ensure that it is very hard for him to get his king out the center of the board. So let's think. Knight takes. Oh, this is just winning. What am I talking about? Hopefully, you guys see the tactic. I didn't see the tactic until now, but knight takes e4 wins the game. Why does knight takes e4 wins the game? For one, the guy's king is in the center of the board. And when someone's king is in the center of the board, we open lines pointing towards their king. If he chooses to take with the bishop, then his bishop is pinned. And what do we do to pin pieces? We put pressure on them. So now we play the move pawn to f5. I successfully applied pressure to his pin bishop, and now I'm just winning material. I mean, it's best if he just get his king out the center of the board now, that he has the chance, and then just give him the bishop. There's nothing else that he could do. He plays f3, which means once I take the free bishop, well, his king is not going to be able to castle on the king side anytime soon. So what I'm going to do now is to ensure that the king is also not able to castle on the queen side. And I also need to finish my development. So bishop to g4 is just such a good move. Preventing the king from castling on the queen side. My rook prevents the king from castling on the king side. And my a rook is now the only piece that is not doing anything. So now I can play moves like rook to d8, try to apply some pressure to his bishop, or just rook to e8 to win the pawn on e4. He checks instead, which means no, his bishop is unprotected, but I'm in check, so let's just get out of check. He still needs to do something about this bishop. Maybe he's going to move the bishop out the way, but moving the queen from d3 to b3 as a drawback. Remember we spoke about drawback, guys. What's the drawback? It means the queen was guarding the pawn on e4. It's no longer guarding the pawn on e4. And if he allows me to take on e4 with check and grab the rook, it's over. He puts the queen back on d3. The guy legit just did me a favor by checking the king. Now I don't have to worry about my king being weak anymore. All right, how do we win this game? There's rook to d8, which hits the pawn, assuming he plays pawn c3. Then I hit him with knight e5, hits the queen. Bishop is not able to take. And once the queen moves, there's this move, knight to f3 check, which means his king now has to come on a square where he's going to be discovered attack on the next move. So this is just winning. And I want you guys to notice how I'm playing. I have many students who it's crazy. I have to talk to them about the same thing over and over and over again. Don't try to start attack to bro. Guy played rook to d1. At least look on my last move, Mr. Nigeria. I'm attacking your bishop twice. Lock in, bro. Okay, I'm about to win material, so let's trade first. And then after he plays his next move, we simply take the free bishop. Now I'm gonna be ahead by what, 2 pieces? He took with the queen. This is a free bishop, but the threat is better than the execution. And whenever you see a good move, you want to look for a better one. So instead of taking the free bishop, let's take on e4 with check, forcing the king to move. And if the king goes to f2, we can always check him here, pick up the queen. And if the king comes anywhere here, okay, rook check, the king is just going to run. Oh, but he's still losing the queen. It's over, guys. Yup. King goes to f2. Guy thinks I'm trying to take his bishop. We don't want that bishop. The king is on the same line as the queen. We go rook to f8. Puts the rook on the same line as this is called a skewer, by the way. Notice how the king had to move out the way, and then we take the queen. But even before we take the queen, we could take the bishop first with check because it's not like he's able to block with the queen because I'm simply going to take. And he also has to be careful where he puts the king. I think he has to put the king here, which is what he did. And okay, can we get better from this? Again, taking the queen is winning, but if you see a good move, look for a better one. Let's check the king again. Now the king is not able to escape this way, so the king has to go here. And now I'm just trying to set up my checkmate. The king moves. How does this go? Now we take. Very, very simple idea. This is how I'm going to checkmate him, guys. Let me show you how I'm going to checkmate him. After the rook takes, I'm going to play this move bishop to h3. Why is bishop to h3 so strong? It attacks the opponent's rook. There's nothing he could do with the rook, and then I'm going to be checkmating him on g2. So let's hit him with bishop to h3. That's a trick. Guys, threatening checkmate on the back rank. Don't be falling for these tricks. Let's just play h5 to not get checkmate. And if you did not see that, then this is why you keep on getting checkmate. You have to ensure, even though when you're completely winning, you have to ensure that you're still seeing the opponent's ideas. Okay, he hits the queen. Let's just pin the rook. And once all the pieces join the attack here, that's how we're going to be checkmating him. He moves the king out the way. Now I'm going to hit him with a tactic called removing the guard. Notice how the king is the main defender of the rook, which is why I'm going to hit him with the move bishop h3 check. What am I doing? I'm forcing the king to move away. And then once the king moves away, we grab the rook. Now he did not move his king away, but now it's just checkmating too. Now all I need to do is check him on e1. King can't move, by the way, due to my bishop, which means the rook has to block on f1 and the opponent resigns. More French defense against 1100 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1100. Some more French defense coming your way. Okay, knight f3. Maybe he's going to take and play the exchange variation of the French. But by now we should know how to play against this. Okay, now we take back. Now we have a very simple plan. Like my goal is to castle, or not necessarily to castle on the queen side, but I want the position to be a bit complex so that way it appears as if I'm trying to castle on the queen side. Once they play h3, we go back, and in fact, g4 is actually not a bad move for black in this position because usually we say don't pin the knight to the queen if the king is not castled. He plays knight c3 though, just developing normally. Let me just develop my knight instead. And whenever they play the exchange variation of the French, it's just normal development. Like, I like to play knight c6 and bishop d6. But whenever the knight is on c3, it's a bit harder because knight b5 could be annoying. Yeah, this check. Oh, this check is actually an idea because if I block with the bishop, which is what I'm going to do, he's actually able to check here. And once he checks here, he hits the king and the unprotected pawn. But I'm just going to try to get my king out the center as quickly as I possibly can and then start an attack on his king. So I don't mind if he's winning a pawn and his queen is going to be a bit misplaced. Okay, he develops the bishop, didn't go for the pawn. Maybe he's just trying to get his king castled. Who knows? Let me just get my king out the center of the board. The issue with this position as well is it's going to take him a while to develop this bishop on f1. Okay, he got his king out the center of the board. I still need to finish my development though, so let's just go knight to d7. I have some ideas of going bishop to b4, hit the knight, maybe rook to e1, put my rook on the same line as his queen. Moving over the king is also fine. Now it's time to start my attack. All right, how do we start this attack? Bishop to b4, then he's able to take because of this pin. Let's play h6. Nah, let's go rook to e8 first. Like, if you're not forced to push a pawn on the side that your king is on, then you don't necessarily have to do it because the moment you push a pawn on the side that your king is on, you're now giving the opponent a hook. All right, so he saw what was happening. He moves the queen off the same line as my rook, but bishop to g6 hits the queen again. I'm trying to get as much tempo as possible on his queen. Okay, queen to b5 hits this pawn, and I'm really contemplating sacrificing the pawn. Because if he takes rook to b8, I'm putting my rook on the same line as the king. Like, there has to be something coming out of this. He might play queen b5, and I will play pawn c6. That's more tempo on his queen. And remember, guys, like, my whole plan was to roll these pawns up the board. So if he's going to take these pawns, it's basically helping me because he's voluntarily helping me to have open lines pointing towards his king. He took. Now we go here. I am sacrificing some material, by the way. So this doesn't mean once I sacrifice the material, I'm automatically winning the game. It just means I'm now able to get attack on his king, which means if he's able to find some perfect engine defensive move, he could be doing fine. Okay, but now we have to be careful because my plan was to use my queen to infiltrate. Actually going to go back to a8 because I need to get my queen access to a5. And the only square for his rook right now is b7. Then I'm going to go queen a5. So I'm not necessarily threatening anything on a7 right now. But the plan is to go rook to b8. Once the queen moves away, he is at risk of losing the game because there's some very nice sacrificial ideas there. And as you guys could see, I already have a lot of pieces pointing towards his king. but I am down by 2 pawns. Now he's trading some pieces off the board. Okay, very smart. Let's take here. And it's not bad. If you're ahead in material, you should trade pieces off the board. Ooh, 95. Now the threat is to grab this pawn. But let's calculate here. Let's calculate. We have to calculate deeply as well. Let's say we play rook to b8. I put my rook on the same line as his king. If he takes the knight, I take his queen. He takes my queen, I take his knight. If he takes my bishop, I sack the rook. King takes, I check. King back, I check. King here, I check. And that could lead to mate. Wait, I go here. Queen takes the bishop, I sack, takes, check. King goes here. What do I do if the king goes here? Because I'm losing a lot of material. Maybe I could take here, certain some mate, but bishop to d3. It's too risky. With that being said, after I go here, hit the queen. If he takes my bishop, I'm just going to take his knight. Here, yeah, let's do this. He's also able to take on c6, by the way. But if he takes on c6, actually, what do I do if he takes on c6? I put the rook back on c8. After he moves the queen, I sacrifice the rook on c3. Then I take on a2. And that could lead to a checkmate. He took the bishop. Now the guy's ahead by 5 points. This is called a pin, guys. I have an upcoming book. I talk about the pin tactic a lot in that book. Pin pieces don't protect, which means now I'm able to take on c3. And I think black is just winning here because I'm threatening every single focal point around this king. And remember focal points, guys. This is a very important weakness for you guys to be able to attack. Focal points are any pawns or square around the opponent's king. Notice how I have two pieces targeting this focal point. So I'm threatening mate there. I have two pieces targeting this. Oh, queen to d8 check. Queen to d8 check. That's a nice move. Because if he plays queen to d8 check and I take the queen, then he's going to be able to take my queen because the pawn is not pinned anymore. Ah, he didn't find it. That was literally a brilliant move. Instead, he ran his king to c1. But that's just a checkmate. More French defense against 1200 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1200. We're playing some more French defense. Bishop c4 is bad, guys, because now I'm able to play d5 and I'm gaining tempo on the bishop. Remember, you shouldn't be moving the same pieces more than once in the opening. So once I take, you're now forced to move your bishop again. All right, the bishop goes back to b3. Now we just need to develop our pieces normally. He's developing. Let's develop the bishop, pin that knight. H3 is usually the best way to react to the pin. And then after I go back to H5, he needs to play G4. If he castle, then it's just going to be super annoying for him. Let's put the bishop on E7, so that way if he plays rook to E8, it doesn't come with check. Okay, now he plays D3. D4 would have been better, bro. You need to control the center. Let's just get the king out the center of the board here. He's asking for something. The only piece that I have that is not yet developed is my knight on B8. So the plan is to put the knight here. He develops the bishop. Now we develop our knight. All our minor pieces are now developed. Remember, after you develop all the minor pieces, the goal is to start getting the major pieces in the game. Okay, then he plays c3. Why c3? Why not just finish your development? I mean, I think he's just making it hard for him. Because look on the move that I'm about to play. I'm going to hit him with knight e5. Keep in mind, he's not able to take my knight because pin pieces don't protect. And I'm threatening to take and double up his pawns. But because he plays this weird-looking c3 move, that had a drawback. The pawn on c2 no longer guards the pawn on d3. And the only way for him to not double up his pawn is to put the knight on d2, which has another drawback. The queen on d1 no longer guards the pawn on d3. So now we take the pawn on d3, and that's a free pawn. So he moves his queen, applying some pressure to my knight. Let's just defend the knight. I'm also putting my bishop on the same line as the queen. So now he needs to be aware of some nasty discovered attacks that I could be threatening. Tactics alert. Like, guys, I have a book coming up, and pieces on the same line is the third most important weaknesses that you need to be looking out for. This has to be a tactic. But once you have your bishop on the same line as a piece that is more valuable than a bishop, there has to be a tactic. What am I going to play here? I'm just trying to move my knight somewhere, and I'm trying to look for something to capture. I'm also trying to look for the most valuable thing to capture. And that's why I'm just going to take the pawn, because there's nothing else that I was able to take. But now he has to move his queen out of the way. I may put the knight back on d3, depending on where he puts the queen. He puts the queen back to c1, which means I'm able to put the knight back to d3, and I'm attacking his queen. The good thing about my position is If he puts the queen on d1, there's a drawback. The queen no longer guards b2. He's not able to put the queen on e1. And if he puts the queen on any one of these squares, he puts his queen on the same line as my bishop. Okay, queen d1 was played. Let's grab more free material. Now his queen is under attack. Tactics alert. You see what I'm telling you guys? Pieces on the same line is so important. Because the queen and the rook is on the same line, I just need to hit him with bishop to d3. Now he's forced to move the queen out the way, and then all I need to do is to take on f1, and then I'm now completely winning because I'm already ahead by 3 points. The queen moves to e5, doesn't really do much. I'm seeing if I'm able to, do something a bit fancy, but I'm not seeing it. So let's just grab the rook. He took with the rook. Now I'm going to hit him with this move, c5. We still have to ensure that we're playing attacking move. I'm ahead by 5 points, so the position is just completely winning. Whoa, bro, what was this? I was attacking the guy's bishop. For one, he didn't move the bishop. Two, he blundered another bishop. Yeah, this is peak hope chess. Liam, you're representing Canada. The guy wants me to take on d5 so that way he checkmates me. That's peak hope chess, bro. Like, okay, what happens if I take with the queen? Maybe he's gonna take on e7. So what happens if I just take your bishop? That's more material. And keep in mind, his bishop on d5 is hanging. So let's see if this Liam guy is gonna hang two pieces back to back. Okay, he didn't. He took it the rook. Let's hit the bishop, force the bishop to move. Moves the bishop back. Didn't hang any material this time around. All right, can I set up something fancy? Like, what if I put the queen on b6, put the queen on the same line as the king, leaving my bishop on the hanging? Because if he takes my bishop, I take this pawn with a discovered attack. He finally saw something because now he moves the king out the way. And okay, how does this work? Let's just take on c3, hit the knight. Because if he plays knight c4, I take. And if he takes on e7, I just take his knight. Plus, there's also rook to e8. Queen takes, okay. Let's bring more pieces in the game with tempo. Let's force the queen to move. Queen moves out the way. Look on where the guy decided to put the queen. On d3. That's a queen, bro. Good game. He resigns. More French defense against 1300 level players. Stick around. The opponent is now 1300. We're playing some more French defense. F4, very interesting. We're always going to play d5, regardless of what they play, though. And now that he plays this e5 move, whenever they play it like this, I like to immediately get my knight to the f5 square because they're more than likely also going to want to put a pawn on d4. And once they have the pawn on d4, we're still going to play pawn c5 and target that pawn. So he did play pawn to d4. Now I'm going to play pawn c5. And I have a very simple plan here. Attack that d4 pawn with every piece that I have. And if he eventually take on c5 and I play bishop c5, he's also going to be losing the right to castle, which is why he plays immediate bishop d3. But that's a pawn, bro. Like, how many pieces does he have guarding the pawn? Only the knight. I have two attackers. Maybe he thinks I'm going to take with the pawn and then he takes my knight, but no, I'm going to take with the knight. And if he takes with his knight and I take, just like that, we're already ahead by a pawn. But he got his king out the center of the board, which is not bad. And he has the good bishop, and I have the bad bishop. And I'm assuming in some cases he wants to play f5. But what I'm going to do in this position is I'm going to attempt to neutralize his attack before he even starts. How does this work? I want to be very careful. I think he also wants to check me here. Let's start by playing knight c6 because there's no f5. If he plays f5, he's just losing this pawn. Okay, he just gave in and then he plays c3. But still, guys, again, you do not trade. To take is a mistake. Only trade if it improves your position or hinders the opponent's position. So if I take on c3, knight takes c3, I'm helping him to develop. So what am I going to do? I'm going to develop my bishop, supporting my pawn on d4. And then if he takes on d4, I take back, and it's helping my bishop. Okay. He sees that I'm trying to put my bishop on the same line as his king, so he moves the king out of the way, which is smart. I need to finish my development here, though. So let's see. Let's just go bishop to d7, just trying to finish my development. Castling the king followed by playing f6 is also a move. And as a French defense player, this f6 move is very important. But don't be playing too much f6 with a king in the center, because if you're going to play f6, you have to look out for moves like queen h5. It's not a bad move. That's a nice move. Why did he put his queen there? He's not trying to attack my king, but that's fine. I'm going to castle into it because there's no real attack. That is right here. Maybe he could sack his bishop and then after I take, he move his rook to f3, which is kind of dangerous, by the way, but I should be able to find some defense for this. Like, should be able to, at least pull my knight back in the game. But if he plays something like bishop queen to h5, I play g6, I'm 100% safe. Okay, he plays f5, but we spoke about this, bro. This is the drawback principle. Everybody's blundering with the drawback principle. You move the pawn to f5, just ask the simple question, what is no longer being guarded? Or ask, what is the drawback of my opponent's last move? How can I exploit it? The pawn is now unprotected. We take the pawn, hit the queen, hit the bishop. So now he has to pull his queen somewhere where he protects the bishop. And then I'm going to simply take the bishop, and that is more material for us. Okay, so he moves the queen out the way, still grabbing that bishop. It's a bit tricky though, but I'm gonna do it. Like, once I take the bishop, he doesn't have to immediately take back. He could actually play this f6 move first, which he didn't play. All right, I want to take this pawn, but then if I take the pawn, he's gonna take my pawn. With that being said, I have another idea. Play queen to b6, add more defense to my pawn, but I'm secretly trying to play bishop to b5, a skewer, because his queen and his rook is on the same line. F6 was played. I still have to be very careful here because even if I play bishop to b5 and then go for the skewer, queen to g3 and he's threatening mate. So let's just play this move pawn to g6, defending against his checkmate. And he has a very simple plan here. Move the queen, try to get his queen on the h6 square. If I allow him to get his queen on h6, then I'm checkmated. It's over. Well, there's very simple defense for these types of moves. For example, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move my rook out the way. Let's say I put my rook on d8, because my bishop is also on the same line as his queen. If he puts his queen on h6, threatening the mate, which is what he did, I'm just going to pull my bishop back, defending the mate and attacking his queen. So now he just wasted tempo for no reason. I'm ahead by 2 clean pawns. The guy's still not finishing his development. Like, I think he's waiting on me to take on c3, so that way he's able to take back. But I'm not going to do that. Like, I prefer to push the pawn to d3, not taking on c3, and said, hey, I have a pass pawn. And then eventually, I can always play e5 followed by e4 and support my pawn. That was a nice move. That was a nice move. You see what he's trying to do here? He's trying to eliminate my bishop because he knows that my bishop is the main defender of my king. So I need to ensure that I'm keeping my bishop protected. So let's just play the move queen to d6. If he takes the bishop, I take back. And then I can also take his bishop and pull my queen back to f8. All right, he develops his knight. Let's just play e5. Very simple plan. The plan is to go e4, protecting everything. Knight to f3 is a nice idea, actually, because if he manages to play knight f3, eventually he wants to play knight to g5, and then he wants to take, and then he wants to checkmate on h7. So we have to be careful again. All right, so he's going for the trades. We have to take with the queen. Knight to f3 followed by knight g5 is an idea. But the moment he plays knight g5, I should be able to play h5 and I'm fine. We're currently defending, guys, but it's very important that you guys understand how to defend. Okay, he's getting his... I think he should have played knight f3. Because even though he's getting his rook in the game to attack my pawn, now once I play e4, it's a bit harder for him to play knight f3. So it's just less problem for me. And I'm planning on playing h5 followed by queen to h6, just to ensure that my position is as active as possible. There's also rook to c8 and then start rolling my queenside pawns up the board. All right, knight b3 is good. He's trying to centralize his knight. That's not a bad score for the knight. I have 2 connected pass pawns prepared to start rolling up the board. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to support these pawns. So let's play rook to e8 so that way I'm able to push. One thing that you guys need to know is if you have 2 pass pawns on the opponent's 3rd rank, assuming you're playing with black, or on the opponent's 6th rank, assuming you're playing with white, then they are actually stronger than a rook. So he needs to ensure that he don't allow me to play e3. Poor guy. He plays knight c5. I'm not sure if he's trying to trick me or something, but that's a free knight, bro. Maybe he thinks once I move my queen away, and now queen h6 is going for mate. I'm just going to pull the queen back, bro. This is game. Knight 3. Random pawn moves. Now we just roll the passed pawns up the board. I'm just not gonna move my queen too far away. I'm sure he's hoping and praying for me to put my queen somewhere so that way he puts his queen on h6 and that's how I'm just not gonna move my queen. I'm just waiting on him to put his queen here so that way I'm able to put my queen here, which is why he plays this move, attacking my queen. But let's just pull the queen back to f8. Like, there's nothing here. I'm rolling the pawns up the board. My pawns are stronger than his rook, which means I should also be queening one of my pawns and winning one of his rook. So he moves his queen, which targets both of my pawns. But how does this work? If I push, he puts the rook here. So I'm going to push this pawn instead to attack his rook. And then once he saves the rook, I'm able to simply play bishop to b5, and then everything is just safe. Okay, he moves the rook. We have to be slightly careful. Let's protect our pawn. If he moves the queen too far away, then I'm able to push. This is where the game ends. This is definitely where the game ends. Because, yes, he's attacking my unprotected bishop, but we already said the pawns are stronger than a rook. So I'm not even going to save my bishop. I'm just going to hit him with rook to d8. Because if he takes the free bishop, I now roll the other pawn to d2. And how will he not allow me to promote? Because I am going to win his rook, and I'm still going to be promoting to a queen. And that's why connected pass pawns are so strong. And he resigns. More French defense against 1400 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1400. We're playing some more French defense. On d4, we go d5. Okay, we're seeing the exchange variation of the French. There's a lot more fun ways in which persons could play against the French defense. The exchange is a bit boring, but hey, we're just going to be developing our pieces here. By the way, guys, in case you don't know, you could subscribe to the membership section of YouTube if you want to get access to all the video of me explaining all the theory behind each of these opening videos that I play. I think the cost for it is like $2 or something like that. Okay, knight to f3 was played. He's just developing normally. I'm just going to get my king out the center. And then from here, I only have two more pieces that needs develop. So it's just very, very simple development. So he develops the bishop to e2. Let's develop my bishop to f5. Again, just normal development. Then after he castles his king, I'm actually going to put my knight on d7 and not c6 because just in case I have to play c6 to keep my pawns guarded, I'm going to do that. Now he plays h3. Yeah, that's a decent move. Let's go rook to e8. Rooks needs files. I want you guys to notice how I'm trying my best not to move the same pieces more than once, and I'm trying to ensure that I'm controlling the center as best as I can. But let's just play this move pawn to c6. I like to have my pawns in chains, and then from here, I can start thinking about some moves like knight e4 to start putting my pieces on the opponent's half of the board. Okay, bd3 makes some sense. Knight d5 is still an idea because if he takes and I take back, I should be able to have enough defenders. Knight e4, what if he takes here? Yeah, knight e4 is still very strong. It's a bit deep because it seems as if the guy has three pieces on e4 and I only have two. But my rook is actually a defender, but it's defending through the x-ray. So once he takes and I take back, he now has one, two, three, but I'm also going to have three, which means I'm completely safe with my knight on e4. Oh, I was not expecting him to give up a bishop for a knight. Like, that was not necessary. But let's see what his idea is. Maybe he wants to pull the knight back and apply some pressure, or he wants to play this move. Oh, whoa, what a move. Because he's attacking my bishop, which is the main defender of the pawn. So if I pull back to g6 and he eliminates the bishop, he's winning the pawn. Okay, luckily, queen a5, there's b4 takes. Oh, b4 is very strong. Wow, wow. That was his idea. Since I may have to lose the pawn anyways, let's just pull the bishop back to e6. Okay, he's winning a pawn. How am I gonna possibly save this game? All right, he took with the knight. Still have to be a bit aggressive here. Let's go queen b6, connecting my rooks. Maybe I want to just double up my rooks on the e file, set up some little tactics. I'm expecting him to play pawn to b3 here, just to defend this pawn. He did play pawn b3. Now I'm going to hit him with bd5 because now I have two pieces attacking his knight. He only has one piece guarding his knight. And his queen, if he moves his knight away, his queen is going to be overworked, guarding both the rook and the pawn on d4. So maybe I'm winning back my pawn. Let's see. Pawn to f3 is also a move. Wait, yo, isn't there knight f6? My rook is unprotected. Guys, Unprotected pieces causes tactics. If knight f6 and I takes, there's rook takes. God, he found it. So I'm gonna have to play king f8 because I don't want to lose my rook. And then it allows him to play this move. And look at my king in the center of the board. If I have to lose any game, it's gonna be this game. Check. Okay, let's run here. It's very weird now. I'm just down by two clean pawns, by the way. Completely missed what he had there. I mean, I'm attacking this pawn, but it's very easy for him to defend it. Okay, he didn't even defend the pawn because if I takes, check, king up, that's GG's. All right, let's go king to c7. Now I'm attacking the pawn. There's also rook to h8, which does something because both of his knights are unprotected. There's no queen checks, which is good. Pawn c4 is an idea to hit my bishop. Wouldn't be surprised if he just puts his queen somewhere, trying to check me on g3 or f4. Okay, another good move. I could take on d4, and if he takes my pawn, I take his knight. Does that work though? I'm also attacking this knight. The queen has no checks. Hmm, interesting. Doesn't work. Because if I takes, there's this move, knight f5. Hits the queen. Queen f4 at that point. Hits the knight. Still has no checks. If he takes my bishop, I take his knight. And I'm still attacking the other knight. Now, one thing I know is if you're losing a chess game, it's very important that you complicate the game. There's a saying that says, when winning, simplify. When losing, complicate. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so he took. Now I take. I'm hitting the unprotected knight. I mean, he's able to take here though, because if he takes here and I take his knight, he's going to take my knight, which means if he takes here, I may have to take back first. And then my king is still going to be on the run. Oh boy, it's very interesting. I may lose this game. All right, so he took the pawn. I mean, we have to take back. King is not safe. Rook is not in the game. Okay, let's say he's going to play queen c2 or queen d3 or queen e4. I mean, guy's ahead by a pawn. He needs to trade pieces off the board. Trying to trap that knight though. Takes f6. The thing about f6 is it allows rook to e7. But what if after rook e7 I simply play rook to g8 and then I say your knight is not escaping? Because at that point, the plan is to go king here. If the rook goes here, I go king here, and there's no sacrificial ideas. This is my best bet. This is my best bet. So rook takes, I go here. Now keep in mind, I'm in an endgame and I'm down by a pawn. There's also a rook to h4, but the knight just has no good squares to go. So that's good. That's good. Rook to e7. I go rook to g8, have to protect the pawn. There's no knight moves, there's no sacrifices. King to d6 is the threat. Very good, very good. Everything is going as planned. Once I put my king here, he has to move the rook. And then rook h8 could trap his knight. Four. All right, he's clearly just trying to push some pieces to protect his knight, but that's going to take too long. In fact, I think this is even worse for him because worst case scenario, his rook would have went around to protect the knight. Once I hit him with this move, again, there's no sacrificial ideas. So I think he's just losing the knight here, which is nice. And this is why when you're winning, you should simplify. When you're losing, you should complicate. He's not just not able. Wait, what? Was this What is this a move? Isn't there king e6 trapping the rook? What am I missing? Because I've been missing stuff. Let's be careful. Maybe he's gonna check here, but then I take. If he goes here, I take. If he goes here, I take. There's nothing, bro. That's an entire rook. Okay, maybe he's gonna take on f6. If he takes on f6 and I take the rook, he takes my rook and I take the knight and I'm ahead in my tira. Whoa. What a way to win. Guys, this is peak piece coordination. Like every one of my pieces are working together. He checks. That doesn't even work. I'm just going to take. Your rook is still under attack. In fact, the rook is still trapped. Remember to like the video, guys. Maybe he's about to resign. Trying to hit 1,000 likes this video. He resigns. More French defense against 1,500 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,500. More French defense coming your way. D4, we play D5. What version of the French will we see? We're seeing knight C3. And I have showed you guys the winnow variation of the French. So, okay, let's just continue with the winnow variation of the French. Like, I don't want to confuse you guys' brain, you know? We're only going to be playing the winnow today, and maybe in another video, I'll teach you guys another variation of the French. But now he plays bishop to D3, which is, he's just trying to ensure that he's protecting his pawn on E4, which is a good move, by the way. And how do we continue this? Let's just play the move pawn to c5. Pawn to c5 is immediately targeting the opponent's center, which is this pawn on d4. And moves like pawn to d5 is very, very thematic once you're playing the French defense, which is why he plays a3. Whenever they play a3, we always want to take. You know, this is how we play the winner. And now we could take. If we take the bishop takes, that's good for him. So let's just develop the knight to c6, apply even more pressure to this pawn on d4. Now keep in mind, my pawn on c5 is hanging, but I don't really care. And he did take the free pawn. Now, in order for me to win back this pawn or to regain back this pawn, it's not going to be difficult at all. Like, already I should be able to play queen a5, which hits both of these pawns at the same time. So with that being said, let me just focus on my development. Like, there's no way this guy's going to have triple pawns and I'm not going to be able to gain back my pawn. So let's just finish your development first. Now that he takes, I'm going to volunteer. Okay, let's think about it. Yeah, I'm actually going to voluntarily take with the pawn. Now, the reason why I say I'm going to voluntarily take with the pawn, because I'm giving myself an isolated pawn, which is considered to be a pawn weakness. Now he plays knight to f3. He's trying to get his king out the center of the board. And now I'm going to play the move queen to a5. Now I'm hitting c3. Now I'm hitting c5. He's not able to defend both of them at the same time. The goal is not, I'm going to win back my pawn, but that's not just the goal. I'm just trying to ensure that all my pieces are as active as I can possibly get them. I'm also planning on playing this h6 move so that way bishop to g5 is not too strong. Usually when you have a knight guarding an isolated pawn, you don't really want them to go bishop g5, but he played this passive looking bishop to b2 move. Eventually, if he's able to play c4, then he'll be fine. But I'm not going to allow him to play c4. First thing I'm going to do is get my king out the center of the board. That's important. He also got his king out the center. Now we take on c5. Now, one thing I want you guys to notice is my queen and my rook is on the same line. It's very important that you're able to not only spot the opponent's weaknesses, but also spot your weaknesses. Because my queen and my rook is on the same line, automatically I'm thinking about the opponent playing moves like a4, which would try to get his bishop here. He didn't though. He got his rook on the file, which is also good. But let's just finish our development here. Bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the queen. And if he plays h3, we pull the bishop back to h5, maintaining the pin. In this position, I'm not going to say black is better, but I do not have too many weaknesses. Like, okay, let's try to evaluate the position. What's the positive in white's position? The positive is the fact that he has the bishop here. What's the negative? The bishop here that he has is blocked in by its own pawn. What's another negative? He has isolated double pawns. Okay, rook to e3 was played. I guess he's just trying to protect the knight so that way he's able to just move away his queen. But I'm just going to keep bringing pieces in the game. Let's just play rook to e8, challenging the rook. It's my rooks were the only pieces not doing anything. Then right now the only piece that I have that is not doing anything is my a rook, which means I can always go rook to c8, putting my rook on this open file, or rook to d8, which protects the isolated pawn, put the rook on the same line as the queen. Now he moves the queen, so he's basically getting out of the spin. If I takes, he's going to play rook takes. If I take the rook, he's going to play queen takes and then pawn takes. And that's going to give him so much pawn islands. But I don't think I'm going to go for that. I like the idea of playing knight e4 hits the queen, because after he takes and I take, hit the knight, okay, he's probably just going to play knight d4. He's also planning on playing this move, rook to e1 as well. So I think the only way for me to press my advantage is to actually take the rook, because now he's going to have more pawn islands, and this is going to be creating more weaknesses in his position. Oh wow, look at that. He took with the queen. Taking with the queen cannot be good, bro. What's this? Can't I just take the knight and now just expose the king? Hit him with knight e5? Okay, first of all, let's just go rook to e8. Remember, we want to play chess with all our pieces. We don't want to play with some of our pieces. Notice how my pieces are now doing attacking roles. His pieces are now doing defensive role. That's a good thing for me. All right, we need to bring more pieces in the attack. There's knight e4 hits the queen. He's more than likely going to take. And if I take it, the knight, he plays knight d4, and he's doing fine. So now I'm going to be giving up my bishop for the knight. You know, you guys are probably saying I'm crazy because the opponent has two bishops and I have two knights. But one thing that you guys need to keep in mind is the knights, they do so well when the opponent has a lot of weaknesses in their position. Because now I'm able to start targeting these weaknesses. All right, how do we do this first? I like the idea of rook to e6, trying to swing my rook over to the h file. There's also rook e5, pawn c4. Check the king first, then take the free pawn. So let's go with rook to e5 here. This is called a rook lift, by the way, guys. It's a way to like hack a file. It's like, okay, the G file is not necessarily a file that I could use, but if I do a rook lift, then I could use the G file. Now I'm expecting something like f4, but that's not really good because it weakens the e4 square. I'm probably going to just pull my rook back. H4 was played, but one thing that you guys need to keep in mind is whenever you're defending, it's not really good to push pawns. Whenever you're attacking, it's okay to push pawns. Now we're actually attacking the opponent's king with moves like rook to h5. I'm attacking the unprotected pawn. F3 is also an unprotected pawn. The e3 pawn is pinned. The bishop on b2 is just not doing anything. Okay, queen f2 was played, just defending the pawn. Regular stuff. Pawn c4 doesn't do much. Pawn e4 also doesn't do much. In fact, that could win me some material. Let's just go knight to e5 here, just bringing more pieces in the game. The queen on f3 is now overworked, by the way, because it is forced to guard more than one things at the same time. Like whenever you have one of your strong pieces like your queen, you know, like your queen should be a piece that doesn't do too much defending. You should be attacking with your queen. So in this position, one of his most powerful pieces is just defending. And that's why black is better here, even though white has the two bishops. And again, keep in mind, how long will it take him to even get this bishop back in the game? I will not be surprised if I'm able to finish this game and he just don't get this bishop back. All right, so he plays bishop back to e2. He's protecting his pawn on f3, and he's also putting his bishop on the same line as my rook. But now his bishop is no longer controlling this diagonal, which means now I'm able to play knight to g3. So you see what I'm doing? I'm continuing to maneuver my pieces towards his king, but I'm also targeting his weaknesses. His pawn on h4 is weak. How on earth is he going to defend this pawn? Because I have two attackers. He only has one defender. I'm not winning a pawn. Then he plays pawn to e4, which means, all right, he's aware that he's going to be down in material. He's aware that there's a lot of pieces coming towards his king. And because of that, he's trying to trade the queens off the board, which is okay. And because I'm attacking his king, I do not want to be trading the queens off the board. Taking this doesn't hurt. Pushing doesn't hurt. So I just need to put my queen somewhere. Let's say queen c7, continue to point it towards his king. Yeah, let's do it that way. Let's go queen c7. Queen c7 is fine. If he takes, I'm not even sure how I'm going to take back. Maybe just take with the knight, because then I'm able to put a knight on the f4 square. But my pieces are just super active now. He did take with the pawn. All right, how do we do this? Let's just take back with the knight. Now, one thing that I need to be aware of is the fact that his rook is able to get access to my background in a lot of different variations. Worst case scenario, I should be able to block with the knight, but it's something that I really need to keep in mind. Okay, that's also a move that I didn't see, but it had a drawback. Like, okay, he grabbed a free pawn, but what was the queen doing on f2? Not only was the queen guarding this pawn, the queen was also covering this square, which means now I'm able to swoop in with my queen, checking his king, and I'm also attacking his unprotected rook. So he had to move his king over to defend the rook. All right, how can we continue the attack here? If I check, he's just going to move. I'm not necessarily seeing any follow-up checks, but knight to f5 could win me the game. If I go knight f5, first of all, like we're still not afraid of the checks, guys. I'm able to block with the knight. But knight f5, he's just gonna simply pull the queen back, and I check him here. He moves the king, and I don't have much. Maybe I should just take on h4. I think taking on h4 wins the game because now I'm threatening all sorts of checkmate on h1, and we're still not afraid of the back rank checkmate. And this is the reason why we do not trade whenever we're attacking. Whenever you're attacking someone, especially their king, do not trade the queens off the board. Now, it's very important that you're aware that you're attacking. Some persons, they do not trade queens because they don't like trading the queens, or they don't know how to play without their queen. If you're that person, what I like to tell my students is you need to start trading queens more, because you should not just know that you have a weakness in chess. Because if you want to be good at chess, you should not, you have to be good on all the aspects. So he pulls his queen back. Very good move. He's preventing this. He's also trying to trade queens since I'm attacking him. I don't want to trade queens because I'm attacking him. So I could check he blocks with the queen. So I do not need to do any of that right now. Actually, here's what I'm going to do. I'm still going to check because if he blocks with the queen, he loses the queen. So now he has to put the king on f2, which still I'm not seeing exactly how I'm immediately winning the game. But like, there's just so many pieces that I have attacking him. I'm sure someone is going to leave a comment saying I'm missing some sort of tactics. Okay, he moves the king to f2. We need to bring more pieces in the attack. We need more pieces in the attack. It's kind of scary, this position, though, because of the whole back rank issue. Now, let's just play h5. H5 is one of those moves where the computer is not going to say it's the best move, but at least I don't have anxiety about my back rank. Okay, bro, why would you play this? This is what happens when you're defending, by the way. Defending in chess is way harder than attacking. Notice what he did. He put his bishop on a square that my rook is able to take. Luckily, I was able to play h5. Even though after any checks, I'm able to block with the knight. But now if he checks and I play king up, he has no more checks, which is why he resigns. More French defense against 1600 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1600. Let's play some more French defense. Knight c3, let's just go d5. We're always going to play d5 regardless of what move they play. And this guy's deciding to play the exchange variation of the French, which is like very, very popular. Now, I'm going to play this move, knight c6. The whole idea is if he plays knight f3, which is what he did, I'm able to play bishop to g4. And what I like to do when I play the exchange variation of the French is to develop my queenside pieces because it allows me to prepare to castle on the queen side in some lines. For example, now that he plays bishop to b5, I'm not thinking about castling queenside anymore because then he could take and then try to mess with my pawn structure. So then I can always change the plan and then castle on the king side. Okay, so instead I'm just going to develop my pieces normally. Knight f6. He got his king out the center of the board. And now I'm going to play bishop e7 because I don't want him to play rook to e1 and check my king. He plays h3, hitting the bishop. Do not take the knight here. Usually it's best to take the knight and after queen takes, we win the pawn. But because my knight is pinned, I'm not going to take. I'm just going to pull the bishop back to h5, maintaining the pin on his queen. And eventually I'm going to just get my king out the center. So he plays bishop e3, guarding the d4 pawn. Now we get the king out the center of the board. And usually we want to castle queen side, but if you can't castle on the queen side, then you have to castle on the king side. And it's not going to be as crazy as, usually French defense likes. French defense players, they like a crazy game. But now he pulled the bishop back to e2. Didn't really do much, to be honest. I'm assuming he's just trying to move his knight out the way. So let's just play bishop to d6, get some more control over this e5 square, so that way knight to e5 doesn't really do much. He puts the knight on h2 instead, so he really wants to trade the pieces off the board. That's fine though. Let's just trade actually, because I'm expecting knight takes. If he plays queen takes, I can always put my rook on the same line as his queen. So he took with the knight. Let's just go rook to e8. And again, being a French defense player, your endgame skills needs to be on point because whenever people play the exchange variation of the French against you, then it's a very high likely chance that you may have to play an endgame. So rook to e1 was played. This knight doesn't really have good forward moves. Whenever your knights don't have good forward moves, then try to maneuver your knight. So that's what I'm doing. So knight e7, the plan is to go to g6 or f5. He plays pawn to c3, and then I'm going to play pawn to c6 because I'm trying to play moves like queen to b6 to attack the pawn or queen to c7 to target this knight on f4. The plan was to also target his knight on h2. It's crazy now though because if he moves this knight out the way, we're able to take a free knight on h2 with check. So maybe he has to play something like g3, which is pushing pawns on the side that his king is on. So that could be a problem. All right, so he did play g3, which means now he's free to move this knight. And I want to make it as hard as possible for him. Let's go knight f5, hit the bishop. And then eventually I may also play knight e4 to put my knight on this very strong e4 square, baiting him to push more pawns on the side that his king is on. And then if he do it, he's going to be losing his pawn on g3. So he pulls the bishop back, not going to trade, by the way. Let's go knight e4, bringing more pieces in the attack. And in some cases, I'm threatening to take his bishop and then take on f4, give him a very bad pawn structure. And then that endgame could be winning for black. But I'm going to try to get more from that. Like doubling up the rooks on the e file is also an idea because the e file is the only open file on the board. So if I can have both of my rooks on that open file, then that's going to be very good for us. Okay, he just decides to pull his knight back. Like, that can't be good though. I think this is a tactic, guys. There's a tactics here. There has to be a tactic here. Because what I talk about in my book a lot is whenever there's more than one weaknesses in a position, then there's usually likely a tactic. And in this position, there's king safety issues because the guy's been pushing pawns on the side that his king is on, and the knight is unprotected. Now, in my book, if I was explaining this, the theme would be sacrifice to expose the enemy king. And he's also not able to accept the sacrifice because if he takes the sack, then I check. He moves the king, we take the knight, and we're just chilling. But if he doesn't take the sack, I'm attacking his knight and I'm attacking this pawn on f2. So, okay, he accepts the sacrifice. This is where the game ends, guys. Queen check. The king now has to move. And because he has this unprotected knight, we take the knight and we're also going to be attacking his bishop. Yeah, this is now GG's, bro. It's game. So he moves the king out of the way. This is not a fork, by the way, guys. The knight guards the square. So first we have to take on d3. Now we're targeting the bishop twice, and we're threatening this fork on f2. And in so many cases, putting this knight on g3 could be leading to some checkmates. All right, so he just uses the rook to defend the fork here. But what he missed was he walked right into another fork. So now I'm able to hit him with, okay, I'm not sure which one of the knights to use. Let's use this knight since it's not really doing much. And then I'm going to be able to take on e2. And it's a free rook, by the way, guys. I'm already ahead in material, and we're about to win an entire rook. By the way, guys, I'm going to be making a video explaining the full French defense theory. So all the moves in the French defense, if you're a member of my channel, you'll get access to that video. If you're not yet a member, consider being a member. It will definitely support the channel. So now he puts his king over to h1. Now we play knight f2 and fork the king and his queen. The guy's losing everything. He resigns. More French defense against 1,700 players. Stick around. The opponent is now 1,700. Let's play some more French defense. Before we play d5, what will we see? The advanced variation of the French. Whenever they play the advanced, I'm going to play the move pawn c5 here. Okay, so pawn c3. Let's go knight c6. This is how we play against the advanced. And then after knight to f3, personally, I like to play this move knight e7. Now, queen to b6 is also a playable move which targets the d4 pawn, but knight e7 prepares to play moves like knight f5, which also targets the d4 pawn. And after this move, bishop to d3, what I like to do is I take on d4 first. And then only after they take back on d4, that's when I play knight to f5. But they don't have to take on d4. There's other moves that they could play. For example, he could also castle the king. Now, this is called the Paulson attack, but this works perfectly against this line because I'm just going to take on c3, and then once the knight takes back on c3, we play knight g6. And I'm just ahead by a pawn. Usually what white likes to do here is to sacrifice the pawn to gain some tempo, to gain some attack. But because we're playing the French defense, it's very, very solid. So after a move like rook e1, notice how he's defending, and I'm just going to finish my development and get my king out the center of the board. Okay, now he plays a3. Assuming he wants to play b4, which is fine. I really don't mind if he plays b4. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. I'm ahead by a pawn here. So once my king is safe, I should be safe. That was the idea. He wanted to go queen c2 and apply some more pressure along this diagonal, which means it's going to be a bit harder for me to play a6. But I'm also trying to take this pawn on e5. I'm also trying to finish my development. I think he wants to play h4 here. Like once he plays h4, I should be able to take those. So let's just finish my development. Rook to c1. If I'm able to put my rook on the same line as the queen, that's also very good for me. And that's why he plays g3. Because now he plays g3, he wants to play h4 followed by h5 and force my knight away. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to play this move queen c7 and target his pawn on e5 because I don't want him to get the pawn on h5 and then I have to pull my knight back to h8. That's kind of weird. And usually whenever they play for this idea, we want to play f6. But now if I play f6, he's going to be able to take. By the way, another thing that I could have done instead of queen to c7 is to play bishop to e8, and then after he plays h4, then I play f6, because my bishop would have been guarding my knight. But this is also fine. I'm attacking his pawn 3 times. He's only guarding it twice. I also don't mind if he plays knight to b5, because once I play queen to b8, eventually I should be able to play a6. So he did play knight b5. Let's just play queen to b8, maintaining the pressure on e5. And the good thing about this is if I have to take on e5 and his bishop goes here, eventually his knight is also going to be under attack. Okay, he was very afraid of losing the pawn, so he decided to give up the bishop for a knight. Now, I think I want to take with the f pawn in this position. Now, usually you want to take towards the center of the board, but I think taking with the f pawn definitely gives my rook this open file. And because he plays g3, his pawn on f2 is also weak. And taking with the f pawn immediately gains tempo on his knight. All right, knight d4 was played. I think if I takes, very good score for a knight. If I takes, the knight is going to take. Can't take here because of take. Bishop c5 doesn't work. Okay, maybe I need to. How does this work? Queen e8 or f7 is a way to get my queen back in the game. Knight g5 is not yet a threat. Let's do that. This is a good way to activate the queen. And I also need to get my a rook in the game. So if I'm able to go rook ac8, I'm going to be able to put my rook on this open file. All right, he moves the queen, applying some pressure here. If I takes, there's still knight takes. Queen f7 I like because if the knight moves, I'm able to take here. There's also bishop to c5. I really like bishop to c5. That's more pressure on his knight, which means if the queen takes this pawn, I win his knight. If he takes this way, I may actually take with the pawn so that way my rook gets the b file and attack his queen. Okay, developing the bishop to b6. Well, here is good. Takes, knight takes, bishop takes. My bishop is unprotected, and since my pawn is under attack, let's just pull the bishop back to b6. Still need to get this rook in the game, and I'm still trying to go queen f7 to apply pressure here. But I'm not in any rush to win this game because I am ahead by a pawn. Okay, a4. What's the idea with a4? Takes, knight takes. So queen here doesn't do much anymore. With that being said, since my knight isn't doing much here, why not get the knight here by playing knight a5 hits the queen? And knight a5 to a4 is also a very thematic maneuver whenever you play the French defense. And if he puts his queen anywhere on this file, before I even put the knight on c4, I'll swing my rook in the game with tempo. Because remember how important it is to play with all your pieces. Okay, he moves the queen, not really putting much pressure on the knight just yet. Let's go here still. Apply some pressure to his bishop. I mean, I already have the bishop here, but if it's ever a scenario where I manage to have two bishops versus two knights, then this is just going to be completely winning for me. Let's not say completely winning. Tactics alert. I mean, not really. Bro, that was just a drawback mistake. Like moving the knight from d4 just clearly left his knight here unprotected. That's a piece, bro. Like what I saw was the fact that the queen and the rook was on the same line, and then bishop to a5 would have won material. Okay, I think I see his little idea. Think he wants me to take the knight, and then he takes here, and then after I take, he forks. But what if I just eliminate the knight, though? Aren't I about to win material? Let's just eliminate the knight. Or maybe I could even play bishop a5, first hit the queen, and then once he moves the queen, I eliminate the knight. Like, how many of his pieces are now under attack? This is game. Because after eliminating the knight, I'm attacking both the rook and the knight. So he pulls the queen back. There's also no forks. So that's a good thing. There's no forks, so we don't need to eliminate the knight, even though we're going to be ahead in material. So we need to trade pieces off the board. But let's just take this free knight first. Now we took the free knight. His rook is still under attack. His bishop on d4 is also pinned to the queen. Okay, tactics alert. This is not no tactics. The guy's just blundering. Like, okay, he's attacking my queen. I wanted to just take and then play d4 and then say, hey, I mean, the bishop is on the same line as the queen. Let's just pin the bishop. But that's also a rook, bro. After he takes, okay, maybe d4 still doesn't work. Because if I play d4, there's queen d1 hit the rook. And if I takes, there's queen takes, queen takes. I'm going to be ahead by so many material, though. Let's just take another free pawn. Let's hit the queen first. Like this is now completely lost. I'm not only ahead by an entire rook, but I have more material with the rook. Because I'm ahead by so much material, very simple game plan. Trade the queens off the board. I actually wanted to play queen c6, but my brain instantly saw queen here. So he puts the queen on c7. I have a little plan. If I'm able to find a safe way to get my queen on f3, move this pawn out the way, putting the queen here is going to lead to a checkmate. But let's just go queen to d7. This is what I need to do. I need to trade the pieces off the board. Okay, guys being very creative. I mean, doesn't work though. I mean, let's just trade the queens. Doesn't work. Like, if I move my bishop, there's no queening. Maybe he sack his bishop then queen, but whenever you're ahead by a rook, like there's nothing that the opponent could do to like hurt your position. What I'm about to do is called simplification. If you're ahead by 6 points, it's okay to sacrifice material. You simplify the game. Now I'm only ahead by 4 points, but I'm in a position that is impossible to lose. Now I'm simply going to get my king over to the pawn, and then eventually I'm going to gang up on the pawn. Remember to like the video, guys, if you haven't as yet. Trying to get 1,000 likes. Okay, he's improving his king as well. Let's continue to improve my king. Very simple plan here. King d6, rook to c8, take the free pawn. I'm ahead by an entire piece. Okay, maybe he's trying to get his king in here, which doesn't do anything. Let's continue to attack his pawn. E4, maybe he wants to push. So let's just check him here first. Let's force away the king. Now I'm also gonna have this pass pawn on d4. Now we check, then we take the pawn. The king moves out the way. Let's check him here first. So that way we could still continue to roll our pawns up the board. Now we take. This is completely winning. All right, so rook hits the pawn. Let's play a6 here. And then I'm going to play d3 followed by rook d3. Okay, now we play here. And because I have only seconds on my clock, I'm going to sacrifice even more material to simplify the game. All right, 10 seconds is more than enough time to win this. Just some technique required. Now we take push. Now we have another pass pawn, and this is going to be the pawn that I roll up the board. Now we take this pawn, get the king over here. Nice. I'm trying to ensure that his king is not able to come over. Push. Very good. Oh, but I still have 4 seconds. We need to pre-move. We need to pre-move. We need to pre-move. And that's just a checkmate. More French defense against 1800 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1800. Let's play some more French defense. All right, now we're seeing knight f3. Will it be an exchange? Yeah. We're going to be seeing a lot of person playing the exchange variation of the French. Whenever they play like this is the recommended line that I like to play. Now, bishop e2, I like to develop the knight to c6, and my whole idea is I'm actually preparing to castle on the queen side. It doesn't mean that I'm always going to be castling on the queen side, by the way, but preparing to castle on the queen side, it makes the game very aggressive. For example, okay, if he plays rook to e1, then I may have to just castle on the queen side. What you guys need to understand about when they play the exchange variation of the French is, they're kind of trying to play for a draw. Like playing with the white pieces, you want to be more ambitious. But when persons play the exchange variation, it's not a very ambitious way to play. So I am in fact gonna castle on the queen side, and then my plan from here is to start an attack on his king side. Now, when I play like this, I'm voluntarily making the game complex because I don't have to play like this. But okay, now he could actually try to also start his attack on my queen side. And he's what, 2 moves away from being fully developed? But I'm also 3 moves away from being developed. So the game is still just balanced. All right, so he's developing his bishop. I'm considering developing my bishop. The issue with this move is if I go bishop d6, I'm losing the d pawn. So I can't develop the bishop to d6 just yet. So I'm thinking about trying to get the knight on f5, maybe f6, g5, and just start the pawn storm. But I don't want to start the pawn storm without finishing my development, so it's kind of weird. Where do I put my knight? Let's just develop the knight to f6. Because in some cases I could just play knight e4, and if he takes, I take it the knight, and then his pawn on d4 is under attack. Okay, he pulls the knight back to d2. He's going for some trades. Usually, playing the French defense, you don't necessarily want to trade all the pieces off the board. So I'm thinking bishop d6 now, or I could play this move h5. Because once I play h5, I'm basically confirming that there will not be any trade. He cannot take on g4. Because if he takes on g4 and I take with the pawn, then it opens up this file for the rook, which is why he played f3 to chase away my bishop. All right, now we have to pull the bishop back. Let's just pull the bishop back. If he plays bishop d3, then I take, and then he gets ugly-looking double pawns. A4. You see what is happening? The guy's now trying to start his attack on my king. So I actually need to ensure that I'm starting my attack on his king. There's bishop to b4. There's also knight b4 that I like. Because putting the knight here immediately targets c2, forces him to play an uncomfortable move, but it doesn't really gain much. But I think it would be a good idea for him to pin my knight. If he pins the knight, then I'm just going to play a6. So maybe I should also try to do my attack. So let's play h4. He's going for his attack. I'm going for my attack. I need to finish the development of my bishop though. So bishop to d, I think the d6 square is where my bishop belongs. So he's rolling his pawn up the board. Now I'm sure he wants to push. And then once he's able to push, and then I push, he's weakening the light squares. So I'm thinking about playing a6, even though you don't want to be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on. Knight a4 starts some attack here. But I have a little plan of playing bishop to b4 and winning this pawn. I mean, if I'm able to win that pawn, it's free material. All right, let's go with a6. You know, this is to slow down his attack. Usually, you don't want to push pawns on the side that your king is on. Technically, what I'm doing here is I'm creating a hook. So usually whenever you have a pawn on a6 like this, they need to get a pawn on b5. But if he puts his pawn on b4, then I'm just going to take and I'm safe. So that's why I'm voluntarily pushing pawns on the side that my king is on here. Yo, I wasn't expecting him to play that move. That's actually a very bold move because he's voluntarily sacrificing this pawn. I think his plan is to get the knight on c5 though. Like knight c5, I should be able to just take and then play d4, hit the bishop. There's also this move knight b4 which attacks c2. And now that I'm attacking c2 and I'm targeting his knight, he's not able to play rook to c1 because there's a drawback. Remember, offense is the best defense, guys. So I really like the idea of playing knight b4. No, knight b4 makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because I'm attacking a pawn, and it's one of those pawns, if I take it, eventually it opens lines pointing towards my king. And it's also important that I'm looking on the possible checks that the opponent has. Okay, knight moves here is interesting. Appears to be a blunder, but it's not. I think he has a very cool idea. There's this check that I have to be looking out for, guys. So, for example, if I take, like, I could take it the queen, take it the queen, there's queen c1, then I move my king out the way because there's this knight check that I just have to be aware of it. Knight takes c2, rook c1 doesn't work just yet. Knight takes c2 hits the rook. What is this? Knight hits the rook. There's no check here because I'm just going to take. Then he swing the rook, but then I'm just going to move. I think it works. Like knight takes it the rook, there's bishop d3, but then I takes, queen takes, then take the rook. And eventually what I want to do is play king to b8. Like once I'm able to play king to b8, then I will be safe. But this knight b6 move is what I need to be aware of. If he's able to put something on the same line as my king and then still play knight b6, I could find myself in trouble. There's also knight c5 here. If he plays knight c5, then after the trade, I can always take on e3 and attack the queen. Because if he takes my queen, I take his queen. I think black is doing fine here. Okay, that's also a nice move. Because remember, we have to be careful, guys. Now this whole knight b6 idea, once I take, my king is now not able to run. So we still have to be careful. I think I'm still able to take the rook though, because once I take the rook, the knight is under attack. So take the rook. Let's say he checks. Like take the rook, check, then I take. Are there any more checks? Yes. If he checks with the queen, then I block with the knight and I'm safe. Take the rook. Maybe he first swing the knight to c5, but then I'm just going to take and then move the queen, and I should still be safe. So it's a material world. The guy give us material, we're taking material. He took with the queen, and now that we're ahead in material, it's a very simple plan. You're ahead in material, trade the pieces off the board. So this is a very strong bishop. I'm thinking bishop to d6, knight to b6, check I takes, rook check I move. Bishop to d6, there's also knight c5. I think I need to take on c5. That's probably what I need to do. So I'm considering just moving the king to b1 so that way that knight b6 is not too threatening. If knight c5, I just eliminate the knight and then just move my queen out of the way. Because it's still a very dangerous position. Like I'm ahead in material, but we still have to be very careful here. And moving my king off the c file is also putting my king on the same line as the bishop. Now I think what would be perfect for me is if I play bishop to d6 and then pawn takes, but he's clearly not allowing that. Knight c5 was played. We're ahead in material. Let's trade some pieces off the board. He took with the knight. Now I have to move my queen. Now remember, if you have to move something, move it somewhere where you attack something. So that's why I'm going to play the move queen e7, moving my queen out the way, but I'm attacking his unprotected bishop. The question is, will he sacrifice? Like if he takes on a3, then I just take back. But I'm also considering just pulling my bishop back to c8. Like we have to be safe here. Okay, he moves his rook, putting his rook on the same line as my queen, which means he's threatening some discovered attacking possibilities. So I'm gonna put my rook on the same line as his rook, which means he's now not able to move this bishop. Even though the rook is on the same line as my queen, if he moves the bishop, I take the rook and I'm winning material. Okay, he moves the queen, getting the queen in the game. I'm assuming he wants to get his queen on the b file and then try to start some attack on my b7 pawn. Now, defending is an art, guys. Now, how I like to defend, I like to ask myself, what would he play if it was his turn again to move? And what I'm seeing is there's a check here, there's a capture here, and there's a threat here. So my focal point on b7 is the main one that is under attack. So I'm going to hit him with king to a7 here. King to a7. Oh, but then, wait, can't he sacrifice this knight? Because king a7, if he sack the knight and I take, he check and he takes my queen. Now, I will still be ahead in material, but I'm not trying to lose my queen. So let me first pull the bishop back to c8. This is one thing that I was thinking about. And pulling the bishop back to c8, it's defending against my b7 pawn. There was also bishop to d7 hits the queen, but I'm assuming he still would have put the queen here. So he did still put the queen there. Now I'm able to play king to a7. Still, there's no bishop move. His bishop is actually pinned to the rook, which is crazy. If he takes, then I just take back. So let's move the king to a7, getting the rook off the king off the same line as the queen, because knight takes a6 would have been a threat. Okay, now he's applying some pressure to my knight. He's also trying to put the bishop in the way so that way he's able to move his bishop. Now there's two pieces on my half of the board, but remember, guys, defending is an art. One good way to defend is to ensure that you're able to force the opponent's pieces off of your half of the board. So one move I'm thinking of is knight d7, but if I play knight d7, there's actually bishop takes c7 hits the rook. And if I take the knight hits the queen, he played check. And then after I move, that's when he's going to take. But then after he takes, I then check him on e3. And what am I doing? I'm just exchanging the pieces off the board. So playing this move knight to d7 here, it's going to cost me a pawn, but it's going to allow me to trade. So let's calculate it again. He takes my pawn. I take, attack his queen. He checks the king, I move. He takes well, he could also take with the pawn. Yeah, he could take with the pawn. Taking with the pawn is a bit uncomfortable. I don't want to allow that. So probably not going to play knight d7 here. I mean, I don't think I have much of a choice, though, to be honest. Let's get these pieces out of my half of the board. Takes, takes, pawn takes. My rook is going to be under attack, so maybe I just need to move the rook out of the way and then try to trade the queens off the board. The good thing is, so he took, now I take here, and then, okay, there was queen check, which I didn't consider, but after I move, there should not be anything else. Like if he takes here, I'm still able to check him here. Let's say I check, because it's very important that I play forcing move. Yeah, I really like this check. Let's go for the check. He has to be careful. He could be getting checkmated if he's not careful. He moved his king out the way. I think we got him, guys. First of all, the position seems dangerous, but he has no forcing moves. He has no way to check my king. His bishop is still pinned. So what am I going to do? Now I'm going to hit him with this move, knight to d3. Keep in mind, I'm attacking the rook, which is the main defender of this bishop. So if he moves his rook out the way, he loses the bishop. And moving the rook out the way also allows this move, knight f2, which could result in a checkmate, which means this is now GG's. I tell you guys, defending is an art. Game is about to end. So if I haven't told you guys to like the video, this is the time. Ensure to hit that like button. Trying to get 1,000 likes this video. So he moves the queen out the way, and this is basically where the game ends. And if you're able to find the checkmate, then, that's good. But this is actually a very nice checkmate. Here's how we're going to do it. Queen c7 still doesn't do anything. We check him on f2. The king now has to go to g1. Then we double check him on h3. And if the king goes to f1, that's mate. If the king goes to h1, we check him on g1. The rook is then going to be forced to take, and then that's going to be a smothered checkmate. Knight f2 check. He moves the king, we play knight h3. This is now a double check. If he puts the king here, that's mate. If he puts the king here, we sack the queen and then smothered mate him. He moves the king, we check. The rook now has to take. That's just checkmate. More French defense against 1,900 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,900. We're playing some more French defense. Okay, we'll see d4 a lot. Now we simply play d5. This is where we know what we're facing, and this is the advanced variation of the French. Now, I will definitely be covering all the variations of the French that you guys will be facing in my membership video. So, sure to be a part of the membership on YouTube if you haven't. I know everything about the French, you know, so it's gonna be, you guys are in for a treat. But this is the advanced variation of the French. Now, I like to play against the advanced variation by targeting the pawn on d4 as best as I possibly can. So after this move pawn c3, we play the move knight c6. Remember, the whole idea is to target their pawn on d4. Now, bishop to b5 is already a slight mistake. I mean, okay, you're not blundering if you play bishop b5, but you don't really give up the light squared bishop for the knight this early on. Now, there's also a little trap here that you guys need to be aware of, and it starts with bishop to d7. It's not a trap in terms of you could fall for the trap, but it's a trap in terms of they could fall for a trap. And I want you guys to notice how this bishop is unprotected on b5. And because the bishop is unprotected on b5, there is a tactic. And if you play the French defense, you will see this tactic a lot. Keep in mind, my opponent is 90-97, and he's falling for the trap. How does it work? The bishop is unprotected. We take on e5. This is also a pattern that you guys need to know. It's not just in the French defense. It happens a lot where if they take our knight, we take the unprotected bishop. We prevent them from castling. If they choose to take our bishop, we take with the actual knight. We lose our bad bishop, which is the light squared bishop in the French, and we get a free pawn. So he took on d7. Now we simply need to take back with the knight. Just like that, we're ahead by a pawn against a 1900 player. If you guys haven't liked the video as yet, this is the time to like. Trying to hit 1,000 likes. That would be crazy. Okay, he got his king out the center of the board. The good thing about the French is it's very solid. So even though my king is in the center, there's nothing you could do right now to say, yo, I'm going to open the center and attack your king. So let's just develop normally. The best he could do to try to open the center is to play something like c4, but to me that also seems like a pawn. Like from here, it's just development. Bishop to e7 or bishop to d6, and then just get the king out the center of the board. So he plays bishop f4, good move, because my plan was bishop to d6. Now, I want you guys to keep in mind that I am ahead in material, and since I'm ahead in material, I'm definitely looking to trade some pieces. So instead of playing bishop to e7, I would like to play bishop to d6. And because I want to play bishop to d6, I'm going to play the move queen to b6 first. And another thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is the end game is usually always better for the French player because it's usually just such a solid pawn structure. It's like the Scandinavian or the Caracan, you know, those types of pawn structure, it really gives you very good end game. So what I'm basically doing with this move queen to b6 is I'm targeting the pawn on b2 and I'm also protecting my d6 square so that way I can put the bishop on d6. But the opponent decided to play the move queen to b3 here. And again, has to be a mistake. And the reason why this has to be a mistake is because I'm now able to make his pawn structure even worse. And first of all, bro, you're down by a pawn. Why are you trading if you're down by a pawn? Here's how I'm gonna make this guy pawn structure worse. Let's think about it. Take the queen, double the pawns, but the rook gets the file. And if I takes knight takes e5 is a fork, but then he has knight b5, which threatens his own fork. And then once I defend against the fork, he saves the bishop. So that I'm not gonna do just yet. I'm thinking about just taking on d4. Yeah, I think taking on d4 is good here because if he takes with the knight, then I can consider playing e5. Maybe I'm not going to do it though with my king in the center of the board. Like, I definitely need to prioritize my development first. So let's prioritize our development. He took with the pawn though, so this is still good news for us. And this is good news for us because he did not take with the knight, now I could take his queen. And yes, to take is a mistake. You should only trade if it improves or hinder the opponent's position. And this is a very debatable move. Does queen takes b3 improves the opponent's position? You could say so. It gives the open file. But does it hinders the opponent's position? Definitely. Guy has the worst pawn structure now. From here, it's just a matter of development. So that's all I'm going to do. All right. Bishop to b4. Let's just develop the bishop to b4. Rook to a4, just to hit the bishop, would definitely be annoying. If he plays something like knight c3, then I will not take the knight. I'll just castle my king. Or I would go king to e7 because we're in the end game and you don't really want to be castling your king when you're in the end game. But to avoid any unnecessary risk, I may just castle, swing the rook in the game, and then slowly get the king back in the center. No need to do too much to try to win this game. So he develops his knight. Don't want to take, at least not yet. At least not yet. Let's get the king out the center of the board. If I'm gonna take the knight, I have to keep in mind that not only does it improves the opponent's position, it undoubles his pawn. Now he has three pawn islands, and if I undouble his pawn, he's gonna now have two pawn islands. So I have to really think about what I'm doing here. Knight b5 was played, decent move. We have to look on the opponent's last move, especially once there's a piece on our half of the board. Now, since the knight is on our half of the board, we have to deal with it. He also has two pieces targeting my pawn on a7, but all I'm going to play here is just pawn to a6 and chase away the knight. Because clearly he's not going to play knight c7. If he plays knight c7 and I play rook to c8, okay, I do not get the chance to immediately take the knight, but the knight seems trapped, you know? Maybe he wants to play knight d6 to hit this pawn. That would make more sense. But because I'm ahead in material, I don't see why I wouldn't just eliminate the knight, swing the rook on the file, maybe try to jump on e4 with my knight, and we are in the end game. We have, it's like there's just so many factors that can just tell us that black is winning this game. And if you guys want to get better at your end game, then use the link in the description to get my end game course to my Patreon. It's not just the end game course, it has a lot of stuff on it. So basically, in terms of pawn structure, black is better. I have two pawn islands, the guy has three. In terms of material, black is better. I'm just ahead by a pawn. In terms of whose pieces are more active, that's debatable. That's definitely debatable. But knight d6 was played. He's currently targeting my pawn. I'm not going to play a passive defensive move to protect it. Okay, I considered taking, but the knight really could be trapped if I just play b5. But I don't want to complicate the game, guys. Like, if you're winning, don't complicate the game. He's hitting the rook, just put the rook on the file. Now I have full control over the only file. Let's not say full control. It's not full control because the guy can always challenge the file, which is what he did. But I can always trade. What I'm not going to do, though, is to trade rooks here because even though a lot of you guys know that you need to trade pieces, if I take his rook, I'm not trading the C rook. I'm giving up my C rook, which is on the open file, for his A rook because a rook will always be on C1. So let's just continue to improve our position. Play knight e4, hit this unprotected bishop, chase the bishop out of our half of the board, and then continue to improve our position. Remember, we're in the end game, guys, and patience is a very important skill to have in the end game. So now I'm just going to slowly improve my position. What am I going to play here? I'm going to hit him with the move pawn to f6. Now, pawn to f6 is it's a decent move. There's a little downside. It's very important that you know the downside of your moves. And this is where the drawback principle comes in. And the downside of me playing pawn f6 is I'm weakening the e6 square, but it's fine because I can always play king f7. And my whole idea is to activate my king. He plays knight d7, we trade. Why are we trading? Because I'm ahead in material, and if you're ahead in material, you trade pieces off the board. That's how chess works. Now he took with the bishop. I really like the idea of playing pawn to e5. But let's activate the king first. Now, here's how I want you guys to be thinking when you're in the endgame. There has to be only three things going through your mind. If you're in the endgame and your move does not attack a weak pawn, push a pass pawn, or activate the king, then your plan is not correct. Now, keep in mind, sometimes the actual move doesn't do any of those, but it prepares to do something like that. It means you're doing it. Or, for example, pawn to e5, I did not push a pass pawn, attack a weak pawn, or activate my king. But if I play pawn to e5, my king could come to e6. And if I play pawn to e5, after he takes, I create a pass pawn. And because I create a pass pawn, it falls underneath the umbrella of pushing a pass pawn. So that's basically how it works. Now, if he takes, I take back, I activate my king, and slowly but surely, I'm going to be able to easily win this game with proper endgame technique. Now, if he plays pawn takes, there's also the possibility of playing knight takes, which, okay, it isolates my pass pawn, so I kind of don't like it, but it definitely threatens knight f3. Now he plays this move, bishop to c3. Not the best move, by the way, because now it helps me to activate my pieces even more. Now, bishop to c3, I'm not going to take and allow the guy to centralize his bishop and isolate my pawn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play the move rook to c6. Now, what's the purpose of rook to c6? I'm trying to play rook to c8. Again, I'm trying to double up on the c file. After I double up on the c file, that's when I want to take. Okay, now he plays rook to e1, which means he's targeting my pawn structure. Now, there's definitely different ways to go about this. Like there's king e6, there's rook e8. If king e6, pawn f4, I can always play pawn e4, and that's a pass pawn. If king e6 takes, maybe sack the bishop, then play f4. Definitely didn't see that. So we have to be careful. All right, let's just play pawn to e4. I should be fine if I play pawn to e4, not creating any unnecessary risk. The moment he plays f3, I can always meet f3 with f5. So technically, my pawn on e4 it could qualify to become a pass pawn. Now, how do we continue from here? Let's just continue with the plan. Pawn to f5, improving the king. Pawn to h3 was played. Okay. Maybe I'm trying to get in pawn to f4. So pawn to g5 is also a very interesting move. Pawn g5, there's pawn h4, pawn h3, like we're trading a lot of pawns. Usually the winning side don't want to be trading pawns in the endgame. It's best if you win the pawns and not trade them. All right. I also need to ensure that my knight is activated because right now my knight has no good forward moves. But as we said, patience is very important in the end game. So let's not rush. Let's go rook to e8 since I think a lot of the action is going to be going on here. That's a decent move. He's attacking weak pawns in the end game. Let's just go king to e6, guard the pawn. Yes, I'm putting my king on the same line as his rook, but the only thing he could even try to do is play this move pawn f3. Now he plays pawn b4, his move is bad. Now, what is bad about pawn to b4? It has a drawback. This is one of the main tactical ideas that I discuss in my upcoming book. The whole idea is, okay, he wants to play pawn b5, and if you're on the losing side in the end game, then you definitely want to trade the pawns off the board. But he's definitely weakening the c4 square a bit, and I could see why he's trying to get rid of his double pawns. Now, I have a plan here, which is to play b5, preventing him from pushing his pawn, but it allows him to get his rook here. So I have to be careful, and then I may have to play a few passive moves. All right, so let's see. Knight b6, he hits the rook. I takes. That seems to be good for him. Okay, he wants to push. Let's play rook to b5 for now. For now, I'm going to play rook to b5. It's a prophylactic move that prevents him from pushing this. Now he plays f3. We can definitely confirm that I have a pass pawn now, which means my plan from here is to get my knight on the e4 square. How am I going to do this? Okay, let's just move the king off the same line as the rook first. If he takes, I get the pass pawn. He didn't. He played g5, which is the correct thing because he's trying to trade as many pawns off the board. I'm trying to play f4 here because if I play f4, then it's very possible that I could get two pass pawns. Takes, I have two pass pawns rolling up the board. His rook here gets a bit active. Maybe he swings it over, but pawn to f4 and I should be fine. I don't want to be making any unnecessary risk as yet though. So let's just play g6. He activates the king. Okay. No, I'm going to hit him with this move, rook to b5, because we're in the end game and I'm ahead in material and I'm trying to trade pieces off the board. Now, if he takes and I take back, yes, I double up my pawns, which is not the best thing, but my knight is definitely way better than his bishop. I'm ahead by a pawn, so this position should still be completely winning for me, which is why he didn't respond to it, because if I takes, I help his pawn structure. Let me continue with knight b6. The plan is to play knight c4, getting my knight on this very weak square on c4. And if he plays pawn to b3, it unprotects his bishop. So now move like rook to c8 comes into play, and I'm doing fine. So he did play pawn to b3. We hit the unprotected bishop. I only have 1.5 minutes on the clock, by the way, guys. So I have to ensure that I'm being a bit fast here. I'm expecting him to, maybe pull the bishop back. But if he pulls the bishop back, then my rook gets to infiltrate his position. If he protects the bishop, then he's pinning his own piece. All right, let's hit the bishop. I'm expecting a check. Very suspicious move. Why can't I just push? Isn't this a tactic, bro? Wait, if I push, I the bishop is pinned, right? This is PP on the PP. If I push rook takes, I take, I'm winning a piece. If I push bishop takes, I take, I'm winning a piece. Pawn to e3 just wins material here. This is tactics, guys. Put pressure on the pin piece. But don't worry about tactics. Once I drop my upcoming book, you guys should be able to spot every tactics in your game. Okay, he decides to take with the bishop, which just loses the rook. Wasn't expecting him to lose the entire rook. Checks the king. Let's just move the king out the way. And now I'm just ahead by an entire rook. So let's just start taking more free pawns. I mean, I'm expecting resignation, but he's not resigning. Okay, that was definitely an annoying check. Because if I go here, that's mate, which means I have to go here. So let's not even think about it. After he checks, let's just move the king. I'm ahead by a rook though, so nothing can't really go bad in this position. I can also play pulling the rook back to e7, which just offers some trade, but taking the pawn on b3 is also winning. I have 46 seconds on the clock though, so that's the only catch. Let's see. Pull this back. There's no bishop here just yet. If he takes, there's no bishop here. If he checks, there's no bishop here. And I'm still going to be taking here. I'm just not trying to lose too much material. All right, so he's guarding his pawn. Let's grab some more pawns. Now we have two pass pawns rolling up the board. So now we can start pushing our pass pawn, but let's hit the bishop because we're gonna be ahead in we are already ahead in material. So the goal is to trade. And in some lines, I can also apply pressure to this pin pawn on f3. So he's also in time pressure here. So it's lost. Remember how important it is, guys, to have patience in the end game. All right, how do I do this? Okay. Oh, that was a slip. I actually wanted the rook here, but I should be doing fine. Check. Yeah, this is weird. The good thing about this is anywhere he moves the rook, then I'm taking the pawn. So I should be doing fine. He also has no time on the clock. Okay, he moves the king. Now we're just winning the pawn. Like, okay. Oh, fudge. That's very strong. Whoa. It's crazy. I didn't even see that idea. Good thing is the guy has no time on the clock. That is crazy. All right, I'm just gonna flag him. Yeah, let's just flag him. Okay, he gave us the queen. I'll take it. All right, guys. More French defense against 2000 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 2000. We're ending things off with a bang of a French defense. What will we be seeing? A Tarrasch variation of the French. I like to play knight f6 against the Tarrasch. There's a lot of other different variation of the French, and you guys know I explained the full French defense theory for the members of my channel, so consider becoming a member if you haven't. Bishop to d3, we play c5. The whole idea is to apply as much pressure to this pawn on d4. Pawn c3, we go knight c6. That's more pressure on the d4 pawn. There's knight t2 and there's knight f3. I will be explaining both of those moves. But whenever they go knight t2, I like to take on d4, then play f6. Now, after you play f6, it's very important that you know what happens if they play knight f4. We'll be explaining that as well. But if they take on f6, just take with the knight. And from here, it's just normal. Develop the bishop, get the king out the center. So he develops, well, he puts the knight on f3. Let's go bishop to d6. Plan is to get the king out the center of the board. He castle, I castle, bishop g5 and bishop f4 are both moves. If bishop g5, I like queen b6. If bishop f4, I take. Because once I take and he takes with the knight is now unprotected. And that's why I'm able to play this move, knight g4, and attack this knight. Right, he moves the queen to d2. Usually when they move the queen to d2, I just need to apply more pressure to the knight. So let's just go knight f6. Let's hit the knight again. Eventually the plan is to play e5, but let's hit the knight again. Knight to h4 is also a very interesting move. But let's see where he's going to put the knight. Okay, knight back to e2. Maybe knight h4 would have been a bit more aggressive. Because now I'm able to play e5. And once I'm able to play e5, one could say I get equality. Doesn't mean that I'm winning. Means the position is now equal. Now, there's one downside of my position because as you guys could see, I have a lot of active pieces. The only downside of my position is the isolated pawn that I have on d5. And this pawn could turn into a target if I'm not careful. So I'm expecting him to trade. Like if he takes, I'm wondering if I should just take with the queen and then threaten the checkmate. More than likely, he's going to play knight g3 though. So maybe I should just take with the knight and attack his bishop instead. Wait, this is also hanging. Wait, takes knight g3 and I just don't have anything. So let's just take with the knight, threaten the bishop, force the bishop to move. Now, one thing that I need to keep in mind is the moment he moves the bishop, my pawn on d5 is going to be under attack. So let's just develop the bishop, protecting the isolated pawn. And once I move my a rook, all my pieces are going to be active. Now, you guys are watching the 2000 level games, which means you're like a part of the 5 to 9% who still watches the video to this far. I appreciate you guys so much. But just remember, hit that like button. We're trying to get 1000 likes on this video. And obviously, he's going to want to apply more pressure to my isolated pawn. Now, usually pawn to d4 is an idea because if queen d4, I have a check. But if I play pawn to d4 now, he plays knight e4, and I'm not seeing how that benefits me. There's also knight c4 hits the queen, and it attacks this. What if I go knight c4 here? Where is he even going to put that queen? Maybe queen here. All right, let's just use the time to ensure all our pieces are active. Rook to d8, put my rook behind the d pawn. Now, keep in mind, it is an isolated pawn, but it is also a pass pawn. So it could be a positive or it could be a negative, depending on how I treat the position. All right, now he's getting his rook in the game. It's a very suspicious move. Still want to push this pawn, but knight e4 is very strong. Also want to go knight c4 to hit the queen. There's also ideas of playing knight g4. Knight c4 I like the most though. Like knight c4. Hmm. Yeah, let's go with knight c4. Nah. I mean, it's fine. Hit the queen. The issue with knight c4 is the knight no longer guards d3 and he's able to put the queen on d3. So I'm going to have to protect my h7 pawn first. I'm wondering if I should just go bishop f5. But because of my isolated pawn, I don't want to be trading too many pieces off the board. All right, he pulls the queen back to c1. I'm assuming he was just a bit scared of what's happening here. All right, how do we do this? Still want to push the pawn, but knight e4 is just a clean tempo on my queen. Should I allow it? Should I move my queen somewhere first? Yeah, I'm going to just pull my bishop back to f7. Nah, because he wants to play b3. I'm actually going to play g6. So that way, if he plays b3 and I have to take, there's no discovered attack. The thing is, though, even if he plays b3, I don't think I want to take because my bishop here is also hanging. h4. What an outrageous move. First of all, if I take the pawn, he takes my bishop. But what happens if I pull the bishop back to f7? No. Kind of want to move my queen. Like, my main plan is actually to play d4, by the way. Like, if he allows me to play d4 and then when the knight move, I play d3 and then when the bishop move, I play d2, then that's over. But now if I play d4, knight e4, and that's a tempo on my queen. So I first have to ensure that I put my queen somewhere. Okay, b3 was played. If I take, he's going to take. Okay, this is weird though, because isn't this just a pawn? Because by playing b3, he's no longer guarding c3. So if I take his knight, wait, I take his knight, he takes my knight, I take his pawn. Or I just move my knight. Because if I move my knight, I'm still attacking his knight. So he has to use one extra move to guard the knight, and then I take the free pawn. So that's what I'm going to do. So I still win the pawn, but on my terms. Also, like, just all the pieces sitting on this file is just weird. Like, already rook to c1 is just a good move. Okay, interesting move. Pawn to d3 is not a fork because there is rook f3. That is an interesting move. I mean, that's a pawn though. I'm just going to take the free pawn. That was the whole point. Maybe he wants to play rook h3 followed by queen h6. But if he plays rook h3, then I'm just going to pull my queen back to f6. And if the queen comes to h6, queen g7, and everything is guarded. And I'm the one who's ahead in material. I would love to trade queens off the board. Right, knight moves back out the way, so there's no queen h6. Still like the idea of playing d4, because it also gives my knight access to this d5 square. And putting the knight back to e2 really doesn't threaten anything, so pass pawns must be pushed. Okay, well, once he plays this move, the whole idea was to play queen to g7. Like, I have to defend against this checkmate that he's threatening. And again, if he trades, it's good for me. My pawn on d4 is isolated, but it's also a pass pawn. Wait. Did I just mess this up? Oh, what? What happened if he had traded the queens and then go rook d1? Well, he didn't play it. Now he has two pieces attacking, but I also have two pieces defending. So all I need to do here is just add more defenders to the pawn. I like the idea of rook d5 with rook h5. Pawn push does not really fork. He's just going to take. There's bishop to e6, which hits the rook. But once he moves the rook, I do not really have much. So I'm just going to play rook to d7, because queen to e7 could also be an issue. All right, he puts the bishop in front of the pawn. This is called a blockade, by the way. Knight d5 is an idea, but then he's more than likely going to take, right? Knight d5, knight takes. Knight b4, then he has two pieces under attack. If he moves the knight, he loses the bishop. Let's try that. And if he plays queen takes, it's the same thing. I take, knight d4, knight b4, I'm hitting the bishop, hitting the pawn, and he will have two pieces under attack. Yep, we got him. Good. Knight b4. How is he going to get out of this? I have two pieces attacking his knight, which is only been guarded once. But if he... Whoa. Oh. My knight is unprotected. That is smart. Because now I have to take, and he's simply going to take. Okay, rook to b3 doesn't work because I'm able to put the bishop in the way. But still, I mean, the knight is unprotected. What if I... Okay, let's do some math. I'm currently ahead by 3 points. What if I take, give him the queen, then take the rook? He's going to have a queen and a rook, and I'm going to have 4 pieces. I think that is winning, right? Or I could take the simpler route and just go bishop g6. If he takes, f5 hits the rook, but then he checks here. Well, I mean, this line is more fun, to be honest. At least I'm going to be teaching you guys how to play with an imbalanced position. This is called an imbalanced position. I'm now ahead by 2 points. Like, if I had just allowed him to take back the knight, then the position would have been equal. The normal person will not choose a variation like this though, because they just naturally can't play without their queen. But all my pieces are now just very active. Basically, what is happening here is you could say two queens, two rooks versus a queen. The rook is better. A knight and a bishop versus a knight. The knight and the bishop is better. So he moves the queen, hitting my knight twice. It's already guarded twice. If I push, he's gonna take. We can't afford to give him anything at all. So let's just play b6 here. Pawn to f4 is also an idea because I need to ensure that every single piece that I have is active. Now I'm hitting the queen, still have no good checks on my king. Okay, he moves the queen out the way. Yo, there's a little idea here, like if I take on f2 and he takes, I take the rook. But if I takes on f2, he takes here first. But that's definitely a plan. So I'm going to put the rook on this square, preventing his queen from coming in. And if I take on f2 and he takes, I take the queen with check. Now knight takes f2 is a threat. He also only has a minute on the clock, so we have this one in the bag. Queen to h4 is good, because now if I takes, he takes the rook first. Okay, I'm assuming he wants to check here. Let's just be very patient in the endgame, guys. Now the queen goes here. What's the idea? I'm not seeing any good squares for the queen, but I should be able to attack the queen here. Notice, very patient in the endgame. He also has no time, and the blunder will come. Now, there's something happening here. Ah, tactics alert, right? No, it's not. This is actually very funny, guys. Look at this. If I take on f2 or I go knight e5, he's just going to take my rook. Because if I take his queen, he take the other rook with check, and I don't like that position. With that being said, I'm still trying to set up this idea. Let's go rook to d6. I have to be a bit faster now. He moves the queen. Maybe he wants to check here. Let me improve the king. Nah, that doesn't work. Okay, maybe knight c5. Now let's just go knight c5. Now, the main thing that I'm looking out for are forks. Queen c7. And I was just about to say I should not have any unprotected pieces. But he grabbed my pawn. Oh, he took this pawn instead. All right, he's playing very fast as well. This check doesn't really do much. Maybe I should push f3 to expose this king a bit. If I go here, I'm losing the rook, and he's still threatening to win my rook. Like, whenever you're in these types of positions, guys, it's very important that everything defends each other. No checks here. Rook guards the knight. Rook is unprotected, but he has no way to attack it. And he has no way to check my... he plundered the queen. I mean, he played very well, though. He played very well, but the time pressure gets towards him. Remember to like the video, guys. He resigns.